Alrighty.
We have some. There's some.
Chris Tracker here. Good to see you both.
Back in 2001, when we first began working with Gary Gygax, he pitched this wonderful series of books to us. He called them the Gygaxian Fantasy World, and what he envisioned was this encyclopedic set of books for role players, writers, game designers, the whole lot of us, that we could use in making our games, creating our adventures, writing
Making sure it's coming through my headset.
Whatever it may be. And there was really
I
no
can't
end
hear it,
to
so
what
it's as
he
usual.
Yeah, all right, that's good. That's good.
We eventually
Hey,
ended up
D&D
publishing
time. That's
Fantasy
great, man. Lurk
World,
away.
their living fantasy.
Lurking's fine.
7 volumes in
Here,
total.
I'll set up the
Three
giveaway so
ready
you
to
can
go.
sign up for it.
Another
Hold
3 or
on.
4 after that we were working on. So the series was really open-ended. We are bringing these back. That's what this Kickstarter is. We've got 7 books online ready to be printed. We've got another 3 right after that if we want to get it minimally out as we were working on them at the time. Those will be out definitely in PDF, depending on how well the Kickstarter does, and maybe even more than that once we kind of push beyond the necessary stretch goals and all that mess. But welcome to the what we're calling the Gary Gygax World Building Archives, and please give us your support. Share it around if you can. Pledge if you can.
Turn this
whatever
down.
You need to do, whatever you can do for us and the memory of Gary Gygax, we very much appreciate it.
There, I got it down a little bit.
Oh, you made it in time?
I made it in time that time to get it down a little bit there, yeah. Which is good, because before it was like, hurting the ears. So, how you doing, Les?
I'm doing all right, thanks.
Oh, good.
Games are filling up.
Before we jump in and see how this
I was pleased to see mine
let's
fill up
look at
quickly.
some of our smaller features.
Oh, I haven't checked mine lately. I think I had 2 more open seats last time I checked. Let me check
See
here.
these figures out of the way. All right.
I saw a lot of activity today.
Folder in there.
Okay, let's see.
called
Host,
Magnet
and
Face
some
Cliffs.
hosting. Yep, it's all filled up.
Those
Oh, there you
refer
go.
To a
Excellent.
few specialty items that we have here.
Good, then
You
I'll
can see
send
this
out.
tree right here.
Yeah, I was shocked that it
Actually
wasn't
just
like filled up
pops
the
right
first
off.
day.
And after you pop it
Well,
off, you can
it's a
go
new
ahead.
system. People are
I
scared
have
of a new system.
Yeah.
You have a door.
Yeah, but it's not
piece you can
it's not that
swap in
new
there.
in that sense.
I
It is
also
new,
just have
but
a
they don't need to
plain
worry
cliff
about that
face
part.
you
Okay,
can
Coco.
Swap right. You
Yeah.
can, whoops.
It will
But-
be
You can pop
easy
in there.
introduction. Yeah.
Plus, I noticed some chatter
Okay.
going on that Saturday
So,
where a lot of
let's
people
say you're
had completely
on
forgotten that it had
adventure
opened up.
and,
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
you know, so
Really?
it's a magic word,
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
that
Like I
makes
noticed some
a
people
door
were like,
appear
"Oh crap!"
on
Because
the side of the
I had to
cliff
tell them they thought
for you
they
to
thought for
enter
sure that
inside
my
or
game had already
whatever.
filled up, and I was like,
So
"No, dude,
this
there's
one
still
right
openings.
next
Go
to it
over
is
there."
another swappable one. We have a cave entrance.
Because they were like, "Well, if I didn't get there when it was
These
just
things
opening,"
blend in real well.
and I was like, "No, I'm fine. Just
on the
go over there.
tabletop,
Do
as
it
you
now."
can see.
You sound a little distant in voice.
So there we go.
It's like
Yeah, it
In what
sounds like
way?
it.
it's like
Like-
you're further away.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just
That's
saying.
all
a
right.
little bit of echo too, but
Okay.
not much, but just a
And
little.
then
Yeah.
our last one is down here.
Let,
It could be. Remember, it could be because the ads are running
This
still.
whole
We'll
thing
just see.
comes off.
Yeah, it might be something. Yeah.
Okay, and there's your magnet faces on the back.
You may want to try and
You're also gonna have
gain a
open
hair
box
if you're
everywhere you
able
have
to.
magnets. Most of the
Let
time
me
we don't
try.
want to use magnets.
You
We're
usually
using
have perfect sound, so
Yeah,
that's why I'm
you do.
surprised because
Yeah.
you always sound
millimeter.
perfect.
It sounds
but
like you're in
today
a phone
sounds
booth.
Like, yeah, like you have a different
I needed
microphone or
something
something.
with a little
no,
more
same
punch
mic.
than the 2x6s
Okay.
I usually use.
Are you sure you don't have a
So, you can see the
built-in
open
one in
locks
the
being
laptop that is
useful in
switched
some
to or
cases.
something?
Mostly, I
I'm
think
sure I just tested it.
you'll want to
So.
use
Okay,
them on
yeah.
Okay.
side-to-side
Oh, it
connections,
works. It's just that we be so
because you will get into
normally we are so
situations
spoiled
where
with
the
having
magnet-
perfect sound. Now it's only good sound or okay sound.
Hey, Michael. Michael, if you're able to shout out the Humble Bundle a couple more times. I talked to Luke today and he asked me to do that, and I was like, Michael will be around. I'm sure he'll do it.
Let's see.
Michael, if I'm okay, I wouldn't worry, man. It's early. I'll be pushing. You know, we still got what, 4 weeks. Yeah. We'll get a lot of them filled.
How is this?
That's better.
Much better.
Yeah. Yep.
There we go.
Yep.
That's the way you normally sound.
Yeah. It's not. It doesn't sound like you're. About to go into TARDIS.
Okay, we're changing to my Superman outfit.
Yes.
Yeah. See, there you go.
Tell her back hi. Awesome. Okay, Jeremy. Races in the Greyhawk setting tonight. Hey, Fuzz. I should be all caught up on giveaways, by the way. So, thank you. So we'll definitely do a reprint tonight. Reprint giveaway tonight. I think I owe Tino. Tino has to give me his email so I can link a Dropbox, but that's it. Everything is all mailed out. We're good. We are good. We'll have a fun discussion tonight. Hey, old times. Drawing is good to go. Yep. Dirty, doing good, man. I'm really interested and excited to see what direction Les wants to go with this. Oh, by the way, that Mike Bridges Greyhawk map, man, that sparked some controversy on some of the Facebook sites. Oh my god.
Uh-oh.
Oh my gosh. I'm like,
well, it's some homebrew stuff stuck in there.
Right,
so
right.
That's usually, it's like when I post something that is not kosher from the sources, then some people go ahead.
But Eric Boyd loved it. And he's like, oh my god, where'd that come from? And I talked to him about Mike Bridges, and they found on Mike Bridges' original post with that original map he did, and all. So it was really, that was really cool to see, as part of this discussion, because I know we had to use for that. So good evening, everyone. Kick off this week, even though we're live 2 days ago because of the way the holiday fell, but I got with me Anna Meyer and the great invisible conjurer, oblivion seeker, Les Reno.
Hey.
Hey. Tonight, we're going to talk about, I think that we're going to go on a little abstract spin here.
When you say that, I usually am looking forward to it even more, so to speak. So that's promising. In my opinion.
And this one will be on races in Greyhawk, and I think maybe a little history, maybe a little points of view, and somehow race.
A little bit of a controversy, because we need to address that for all the new players and stuff like that. Yeah, and the terms. So we did get that out of the system first. We get it out, and it's simply the term race. It's a term that was used in the original rules. I don't like the term. And so in my rules, I will use ancestry. In 5e, they use species. Some rule systems use kin. It's and I think those terms are better. But we use races simply because I think that most of the discussion will be about the old school rules. But I also think it's interesting to look what can be done with these things in other rule systems too, a little bit, because there's so many ways you can play Greyhawk. So that was my little talk about that. So now I'm done. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that, Les? I mean, I still use race, and it's just because I'm an old dog, and sometimes you can't teach me anything new. So
I'm flexible when it comes to the nomenclature, but simply because if you go back and you look at some of the letters in older Dragons or some of the fanzine stuff from the 80s, you'll see that there was a bit of a stink even then. Right. We tend to think we live in unique times, right? And that these are new troublesome-ish ideas being brought about. No, there were people objecting back then.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's one other aspect to this that has nothing to do with politics or anything, and that is the fact that a lot of rule systems now diversify between the biological side of things, meaning how big you are and stuff, and the cultural. And that I also think is very important.
Right.
Take, for instance, you might be a half-elf, and whether you grew up in the in elven culture or you grew up in a human culture might distinguish what feats you have and what skills you know and stuff like that, what weapons you have proficiency and stuff. And I think that's another important distinction that I think rule system should cater for, so to speak. So you have your biology that gives the basic sizes, and if you have base hit points, or maybe you have some rule system have attribute changes, you become on average a little bit stronger or weaker or more dexterous or whatever it is, so to speak, and so on. And that is something that I like to diversify the two, because that gives more interesting options. You can be a half orc that grew up in human society, or you can be human that grew up in an orcish or whatever, so to speak. So that gives more interesting options. But original early versions of D&D didn't have it. But it's something that was starting to be introduced a little bit in third edition, and then had been advanced upon after that, so to speak.
I would go even a step further.
Yeah.
And point out that there's also the question of whatever one's biology, or for lack of a better term, we'll call it your wiring, your neuropsychology.
Yeah.
Is there the possibility of change within that?
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
In other words, are behaviors determined by free will, or are they fixed? Right.
Yeah. Hang on a second. Before you go into the too deep discussion, I want to say that
I wasn't going very deep.
If fantasy, I know less. You're awesome in deep discussions. You can beat me, but it's like the fantasy world opens up for interesting possibilities that might only be referred to in NPCs and monsters. So please go on.
No, I was going to mention that also if you look at for example, Gygax's, even though Gygax obviously, there was that idea that certain monsters are inherently evil. If you look at some of his short fiction, I'm thinking the title is Incident or Occurrence on Odd Alley, right?
Okay.
The players, Gord and his company, meet an ogre magi, but that ogre magi is from another world and is actually good.
Interesting.
Because again, you have that idea of alternate universes and multiverses. Here specifically, what I want to think of though is Greyhawk and how it functions in Greyhawk. Because I think one of the things that happens, this is my own hypothesizing here, right, is that in the past you would have an emphasis on settings, right? You would have Dragonlance come out, and you had your Kinder, and you would have your Gully Dwarves and stuff like that. You would have second edition, obviously you had all these great box sets. Third edition, they started introducing new races via the hardbacks, and because some of these books, it started off with Greyhawk as a default setting, but then some of these hardbacks were fairly generic. You started seeing bleed over of different races into Greyhawk en masse. And then by the time you get to 5th edition, whenever something is introduced, it's the new hotness, right? And every player wants to play it. And every DM who wants to appeal to people, there's that urge sometimes, that feeling that to be cool, to be the cool DM, and to not trample on player agency, you have to allow that. Now, I'm a little bit reactionary that way, which might surprise some people. My take is I want that core experience. I want that old school Greyhawk experience. So by default is, here are your core races from the early player's handbook, and maybe a couple of choices from Unearthed Arcana.
Right.
And of course your half ogre, because they're half ogres, man. They're cool. But in terms of some of the other races, your tieflings, your Genasi and stuff. Here's my take. Pitch the character to me. Pitch how the character is going to work in the setting.
Yeah.
Right? Or talk to me about it. Don't just say, well, I want this character. And I'm like, okay, so let's talk about, no, you've got to make him work. I'm like, it's your character, man. Work with me. and maybe we can come to some kind of agreement as to how this character fits in. Maybe the character came over through a portal. Maybe the character is, a very, very rare type of being within Greyhawk. But you want to make sure that it fits. And again, the part of it is that, to me, you don't want all settings to collapse into a single bland setting where every setting is identical to every other setting, and the choices that you have are identical to every other setting. Because at some point the feel becomes the same, if that makes sense.
It does.
And you want a kind of distinct flair. One of the people would say it as a limitation. I would say this, that anytime you play a game, right, there are rules in place and there are limits and things. Basically, it's the parameters that within which you're playing that help determine how the play style and help determine the emphasis, and that's part of the gig there. Campaign settings have different emphases, and you want to let the players know what the emphasis is, and if they want to do something a little different, how will this fit in, right?
Yeah.
So that's generally my take on it. I'm not when I say I'm reactionary, I'm simply like, okay, really make a pitch. If a player makes a good pitch, and many of my players are pretty sharp kids, right? They're sharp folks, so they'll make a great pitch, and I'll go, okay, I'll allow this, right?
For me, that will be per campaign. Meaning, some campaigns, like my current Shieldlands campaigns, humans only. And
again, that ties into region, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It depends on where my campaign was. Yeah, exactly. Storyline and so on. When I do an elven campaign next, it's probably going to be up. Then it will be elves, half elves, probably gnomes, and maybe humans and stuff too. So we'll see. Yeah.
No,
well, yeah, maybe not. Yeah.
I was joking.
So yeah, but it's so for me it will be per campaign based. I might consider running a drow campaign or an underdark campaign and so on. So it will be per campaign for me, which what I would allow, and also what the players want, of course, too. But I will limit it very much due to I will more like the players will tell. I will kind of pitch, I want to run this campaign and with these options, and then the players can I will be upfront in this session 0, so to speak, what I will offer for this campaign.
Yeah. And occasionally there's a special kind of gig. Like I know Tim, for example, has his reverse dungeon.
Yeah.
And in my case, there was a 2-parter called Goblin Knight. Where the characters were low-level goblins in Spine Castle, but they were right on that cusp where they'd been frustrated, if that makes sense. They were goblins who, if there had been another chief other than this one goblin ruler in Spine Castle, they could have advanced. But this guy is old and he's cunning and he's not going to let them. So they rip off their boss, and of course everything goes horribly wrong.
Awesome scenario.
And basically, before they died, I had them recount what it was their goblin had aspired to. So I was like, so and so, as you're being torn apart, what's the last thing your goblin thinks about? And of course, one of them was basically, it was the great I could have been a contender kind of moment for one of them.
That's funny. Could have been someone.
Yeah, and basically that's it. It's like in any other goblin community, I would have been chief by now. And as the goblin slides into the pit of death, so to speak. But yeah, I mean there are ways to do that. And the other thing is that, like, and this will be controversial, so it's something I'm gonna throw out there and put to one side. Okay.
Okay.
As the game has progressed and as people have been drawn away from both pulp fantasy and what I'm gonna call romance infused fantasy. By romance, I mean medieval romances, right? Your chivalric tales, your things like that. There's been a shift away from the kind of archetypal, some would say stereotypical, to the more psychologically complex. Now, what that means in terms of play is that people start complaining about alignment. And when alignment is tied to the setting or to the monsters, and you start getting, if you see what I mean, there's a shift away from an emphasis in that kind of thing, where you have the characters who eventually become champions, if you will, for whatever alignment or whatever alignments, deities or influences. that affects the way that we view monsters as well. We want to psychologize monsters, or at least there's a drive towards that.
Oh yeah, I'm deep. I want the ecology. I want the backstory. I want how they function in the
and
all of that. Yeah.
And yet, my counter argument to that would be what I try to do in my campaign, because I very much like the idea that alignments draw, and like I said, I'm just going to throw this out there and drop this. In terms of player characters, your behavior draws the attention as you become more powerful of certain forces, right?
Yep.
They become interested in either the fact that you're thwarting their stuff, or you could be a champion of their purposes. With that in mind, with the monsters, so-called, particularly they say the humanoid races, you get into this question again of whether some of them are willing participants. You also get into the question of, and I find this interesting, maybe they're resentful, and maybe within their own social order and so forth, you have factionalism and you have resentments, and you have those things that good smart players will exploit if they're monsters. Or if you're playing one of these creatures, maybe that's why you're on the outside now. Maybe you were on the losing faction. You were part of the losing faction during an attempted coup, right, against a chieftain or something like that. And you can still psychologize it. It's just that you have to start thinking through the implications in terms of the game universe and in terms of how alignment functions. So there are ways to do that. But at times, again, there's that impulse. Well, I want my vampire to be like Hamlet, right? We all have this sudden impulse to have we want Lestat. We want Lestat, right? It's something that's very much a post '80s kind of phenomenon, I think, where in pop culture you have the psychologizing of the monster. And it's understandable, and part of it is also because some monsters are darn sexy. Or cool.
I'm not beyond that too, Les. I mean, I have freaking Blade and Whistler in my campaign. Okay,
from but that's different. Wesley that's a Dampier, right?
Well, yeah. I'm just saying. I mean,
he's wanting revenge for what was done to his mother and by extension him. So that's a little bit different.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and there's also the monsters battling monsters thing, right? Which would be Blade would be a good example of, in a way. He's not human, but he's, on the front line in the fight against the darkness or whatever.
Yeah.
But going back to the general take here, and there's also the question of whether some of these personality types or monsters, creatures, whatever you want to call them, races, species, are OP in terms of what you would want from a Greyhawk campaign, whether they're overpowered.
Yeah.
But I would point out, this is again nothing new. We're going to come to that Len Lakofka article about toning down the races that were introduced in Unearthed Arcana.
Well, I mean, for me, it was a boondoggle when that came out. Because then Dark Elf, Deep Gnomes, frickin' even Grey Dwarves. I'm like, oh no, immune to, it got crazy, and I'm like, no, we're putting a stop to a lot of this. So allow Dark Elf.
You mean they have cool magical abilities, resistances, and stuff
Grey
like
Dwarves
that?
are immune to all illusions. I'm like, that's freaking ridiculous. Yeah, it's just, why am I letting someone play a Dargar? Don't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Dark Elf does.
But then you have some of the limitation where there was a lot of absolutes in old school. You were immune against everything, or it was impossible to, and stuff like that. Those rules makes big hurdles to get over, so to speak. They put big roadblocks quickly, and that's one of my problems with. I want these kind of, it gives you slightly. It's a little bit harder to fool someone. It's a bit more difficult to detect and stuff like that. More gradual approach to things, not like it works or it doesn't work only, so to speak. But but sometimes you want the simple rules. Yeah. Well, that's what the 50 years of D&D evolution have.
And one other aspect I'll throw out, and by the way, before I do, Ken raises the point, a valid point, that anti-heroes can be complex individuals. This is true, but I think all characters, including heroes, we discussed a little while back when we did the good guys thing.
Yep.
That a paladin can be a complex individual because you have your code, you have your personal feelings at times, you have your sense of duty to your lord or lady or to your church or temple. and sometimes there are conflicts. I mean, if you want a good example of that, I'm a big fan of Shaw Brothers films, right? And I would say go back and watch some of those Shaw Brothers films, or their later homages to them, like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, where you have these characters who are bound up in codes of honor that sometimes prevent them from doing things that they would like to do. Like say have a relationship with someone, or they're rival schools, so they're, this is my best friend, but my best friend is from a rival school. That rival school has offended my school. Now I must kill them. And that can result in some massively great character drama and complexity of player reaction, right?
Yep.
But going aside from that, what I was going to say was the other thing is that Greyhawk, at least as it seems to have originally been envisioned, there's very much an emphasis on the human beings in Greyhawk, right? Very as written.
For the most part, I'll agree with you. Maybe because
I would say look at the number of PCs. Look at also, we're not talking about the idea that they're just like maybe 50. No, there are communities, but you'll notice that many of these communities, look at the chart in the player's handbook about racial attitudes or responses, and you'll notice how many of those demi-human races either tolerate or are neutral towards humans.
Well, most of them, except for like halflings.
And with that, I think that you get the idea, and again, you have this idea too that many of these populations will have seen. They mostly human beings tend to in Greyhawk, as if we look back at some of, let's say, the way that monsters were described, and by monster I mean non-player character, pretty much. They were all associated directly with an alignment. Now, the player characters and humans, any alignment, right?
Yeah.
But with the creatures, you tended to have elves, chaotic good, gnomes, any good, dwarves, lawful good.
A generalization that can go off. You can go off on pretty easily, right? I mean,
what I would say there is think about, for example, some of the communities that would have seen the rise of a Sararak, or interacted with. There are reasons why some of these communities would be standoffish. There's a reason why in what is it, Artifact of Evil, when they turn up at the court in Selene in Elstad, the reaction is not very friendly to the humans turning up, right? You turned up during our midsummer celebrations, and you're demanding to see the queen. First off, who are you? Second, you are humans entering our domain and making requests of Her Majesty. I mean, there's an obvious kind of tension there, right? And then you have that. You do have dwarves, elves, etc., living in some human cities. But again, you have to look at things like, say, frequency, as in how common are they in the environments where they will be found? What is their attitude towards humans? And you'll notice also that they can't advance past a certain level.
Well,
and that, I think, also kind of places the emphasis. Most players would have wanted to advance beyond those levels, right? So they would have gone human. So it's almost like encouraging you as players in the early game to go human.
I want to ask the audience, how many of you strictly enforced class level limits based on race? Because I certainly didn't. I just want to see how many people in the audience. That was one I never really understood.
Gygax explained it, which was in a discussion on Dragon's Foot. And it was, again, that he wanted that emphasis on the human.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of funny. We had our first two DMs I played under, so to speak, but they were strictly enforced this. But at first I was devastated because I wanted to play an elf, and then we couldn't go high. And then I realized that there is no chance in hell I will make it past 5th level. So it's more of an academic problem whether I can go to 9th or 11th.
Right. So you just played anyway.
Yeah, because I made it to 3rd level. That was it, so to speak, and I never made it higher because we always died, and we made new ones so often that they were numbered. That was everybody here knows the old classic way. They die like flies in everywhere from green slime or whatever it was. But it's so it's in that sense it became kind of academic. But I think it's to me, it's some of these things that from a rule system you need to start looking. I think Gary Gygax's approach saying, "Oh, human-centric." Well, then you should at least declare it openly. But on the other hand, he did.
He did.
Yeah, exactly. He did. So it was declared openly. I don't agree with it because I think the fantasy, the other flavor, but now I have to say that with Hawktails, I'm a little bit guilty because I build humans first because they are kind of the standard to measure things from, simply because I'm human. So it's much easier to use yourself as a measuring stick, so to speak, to measure things from. Yeah.
Let me also propose two things in relation to that. And again, this is going to be controversial. By the way, I'm not saying you have to cap the characters at a certain level. I'm saying that was there for a reason.
Yeah.
Right. Or for several reasons.
Yeah.
Myself, I don't, but there are other issues that I come up, which I'll come to in just a sec. My first point would be that you have the literature that it was drawing on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in many of these cases, like for obviously unavoidable to mention Lord of the Rings, even though Gygax had his issues and blah, 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 and Tolkien, blah, blah, blah. But you have the idea there of a world that is shifting, right? Mm-hmm. Where humans are becoming
because of
the dominant.
Yeah, absolutely.
You also have the kind of sense of that in some of Paul Anderson's stuff, where like the Broken Sword, or where you have these fey creatures and they're brushing right up against. It's almost like a frontier experience, right?
Yep.
The humans are expanding, and the fey or elven types are none too happy about this, right? You also have that kind of idea that humans. And this comes into D&D on a certain level with my second point, which is I mentioned the idea of races being some non-human races being racially aligned and having pretty more definitive creation myths in some cases than humans do. You'll notice that for example, with the elves and dwarves and stuff, there's less flexibility then to some extent. Humans have a great capacity for evil and a great capacity for good, and you never quite know what you're going to get, right? It's a box of chocolates, but it could be poisonous chocolates.
Sure.
With elves, by and large, now you do have deviations, of course. You have your Marquesas, you have your others, but by and large, when you run into an elf, you're going to know what you're running into, right? When you run into a dwarf, you're going to know what you're running into. And I think that's hardwired also when we get to a discussion about specific races, for example, gnomes, who I think are underappreciated and who actually you can learn a lot by reading between the lines of what's presented. There's the way that gnomes react to people who are coming through their territory. And you'll notice that it very much is based on them observing the humans. There's a kind of caution there when it comes to them interacting with the humans, at least if we go from an example from a Gygax module.
Which one?
Sojkanth.
Oh, yeah.
It specifically mentions that if the players are good aligned, the gnomes will be more inclined. If they're neutral, the gnomes are going to be a little more cautious. If they've defeated some of the gnomes' enemies, the gnomes will then offer them help.
Right. True.
And I think that's also, I mean, if you think about, for example, the situation around something like Neural, right? You have, as the lore expanded, right? You have the idea that you have the idea that the poor gnomes around there have suffered through, basically a lich and other things. They're going to be cautious in dealing with humans. Now they're going to realize that, okay, these are good humans, but then again, they were good humans, and then you had crazy bad things happening. So to what extent do we trust? So I think that, there's that thing, that saying in information theory and espionage, trust but verify. And I think that some of the non-human races would view humans that way. Trust but verify if they seem to be good humans.
I mean, and I hate to do a one for one, but that's all throughout Lord of the Rings.
Yeah,
they all don't trust humans, right? I mean, blindfolding them into Lothorian and all sorts of things, Yeah, so there's a lot of that.
And not only that, but I mean, you have like I said, I was recommending and I can't recommend enough some Paul Anderson. But that sense also of superiority from these races, because they're longer, they've seen the progress that humans have made in a relatively short time, but they're longer lived and they're committed to their particular lifestyles or goals or purposes. And humans seem inconstant. They're short-lived. They're short-tempered. They seem to have like zero attention span by a long-lived race's standards. Oh, and by the way, I would point out Rex Fellis mentions, that was kind of my point, is that there aren't that many from the named PCs that we know of. From the early campaigns, there aren't that many demi-humans. I mean, you've got Melf among the elves.
Wait a minute.
There's a bunch of them back in the early books.
I would go through the Rogues Gallery and beg to
Exactly,
differ.
Go through the Rogues Gallery.
But one of them's a chaotic evil elf.
Yeah, and
correct.
Yeah.
Whatnot.
But
Lanolin.
Can I interject for a moment?
Yeah, sure, please, of course.
You're talking about places where they were running 10 to 20 players a night.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of a small fraction, and they were probably included because they were exceptional.
Okay.
Yeah.
You'll also notice that some of the characters are in the Rogues Gallery are reincarnated, the Centaur and the Lizard Man.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, well that's absolutely.
Again, the reason I think that they were chosen, those particular ones, the evil elf and so forth, is that they were exceptions to the standard character.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, by the way, there were some good comments on third edition. The Savage Species book is an excellent if you want to play anything. Anything goes, and this was one of my, when we talked about mechanics around it. That's where I think third edition for me. That's when D&D came of age, so to speak. You could be anything, you could do anything, and also other things played by the same rules. You could construct cool things. You could have giants and have classes, and you can do a lot of things. And that was kind of, for me, opened the eyes that it's the first game version of the game that really functioned the way that I wanted it to. Then it was overly complicated, and the math was kind of escalating into oblivion, so to speak. But that was another problem. But this book is really interesting, and they use so you basically, if you start as a giant, for instance, play a character, you might start at level 4 because you're so powerful just by your biology and all of that, so to speak. So there are ways around it. So I don't think if fantasy in your campaign, if you should run, if you want to play and have all sorts of interesting player characters, there are ways, and there should be ways to handle that mechanically, so to speak. It's just more of think outside the box a bit, and you should be able to handle it, so to speak. You can let them, meaning you can say that drow player characters are third level when they start or something like that, because they have enough powers and stuff built in, so they are the equivalent of that or something. So there are many ways of doing it. Third edition had a lot of good ideas in that way that has been better by newer rule system too, but not by D&D that much.
Give me a second, Les, here. I want to share. I want to all my thoughts on this real quick because I'm going to lose these here. So,
please.
All right. So I want everyone to take a little observation. I'm going to my area of the map. Why did I choose here? Why did I choose this whole area?
Because of the mixture of races.
Exactly. Exactly, Les. Because dwarves, halflings, gnomes in the county Ulick, humans everywhere, Duchy Ulick, Keeland is here. The Wild Coast is a mix of things. Humanoids fighting. Great stories, with dwarves and humanoids in the Lort Mills. Great publications of Temple of Mental Evil, gnomes in the Cron Hills, different tribes of elves all over. It's perfect. This is a perfect spot. So I am not, too bad Dale's not on. I'm not bashing the Great Kingdom, right? I know there's other races here. But when I think of the Great Kingdom, I think of human-centric, and that's it. I think of that way about Nyron, too. I know I'm not 100% right on that, but I don't think of, wow, there's everything around that we possibly could have. My guys play all different races, right? I just just putting that out there.
That this ties into what I was saying though. Was I'm not saying that all situations are completely the same, but I am saying that based on local experience of humans or of other races, like I said, if you're dealing with something around in the vicinity of the Bone March, or if you're dealing with something in the vicinity of, or say a group of dwarves who had experience with the Sul Imperium, you're going to have a little bit of a different kind of perspective than you would if you're from Ulick, right?
Oh yeah, and definitely.
Even within Ulick, I would point out that it's a missed opportunity if you don't only have the demi-humans rather, and the humanoids in play, but factions within those groups and factions within the human political interests.
I have dwarves that hate. I have hill dwarves that hate mountain dwarves, and vice versa. So there you go. So yeah,
you're always going to have that kind of. You always need that kind of tension, particularly.
Absolutely.
And going back to the other point, I'm going to admit that there's a bit of and Ken, I want to come back to that book as well, Bastards and Bloodlines, which I want to say is a Green Ronin publication.
Is it really?
It's Chris Pramis? That company, yeah. But I think it was Kestrel who wrote it.
Okay.
What was the publication?
Bastards and Bloodlines.
Oh, Bastards and Bloodlines.
Yeah, okay, I don't have.
It's basically a book devoted to various hybrids and mixed races, or racial mixtures, admixtures, and it's really interesting. Got some really interesting templates for players who are interested in 3rd or 3.5, and who are interested in expanding beyond that even, and maybe seeing how they could take the template and apply it to other editions, be it Pathfinder or 5th edition or whatever. But one of the things that I was going to say about that is that the problem that I have with 3rd, and I've kind of adjusted for that within my campaign, my 5th edition campaign, is that's when you start getting into the power creep, and you start really getting into the characters who become, how can I put it? It's not that I mind the idea of, people use the term superhero, but they forget some superheroes take a beating, right? Peter Parker's going to get the crap beaten out of him by certain figures. Bruce Wayne has a back of scars, not just in the movies, but in the comic books. And my point being, though, that you wind up at times with the characters becoming overpowered very quickly and very easily, and a kind of escalation that takes place. Whereas it can be a slower and more gradual process. Some would say grinding, but I would say more open to development in 1st and 2nd.
Well,
and original.
We all remember the half-orc of Kellenin with 7 different classes from 3rd edition that I had to deal with. Right? And I had to convert it back. Casey's half-orc. Everybody was like, what the hell is this?
But in 3rd edition, they weren't overpowered just because they had many different classes. They in some ways, what often happened was that a lot of these builds were inept because they had so many basic stuff, but they weren't really shining in any area, so to speak. So multi-classing could sometimes result in you breaking the rules by being overpowered, but often it became characters that were inept at things because all they had was a bunch of basic things, and they never learned.
I don't know anyone who had an inept character in 3rd edition. I'm sorry. I see all these stories.
When we played 3rd edition, it was quite fairly easy. If you had a really powerful scenario, there was often characters who were underpowered in almost everything.
I just want to throw out there too that one of the things that third was notorious for, particularly as it went on to 3rd and 3.5 both suffered from this, is that some of the books, because of turnaround time, were not thoroughly play tested.
Oh yeah,
by the time
exactly.
That's so true. So true.
And my point then becomes, what happens is you have they're not technically, Anna. It's not that you're breaking the rules. Technically, this is a legit build within the rules as published.
Yeah, but the rules as intended.
Problem.
Yeah, and just a little caveat here when we're discussing this issue is that one of the problems with third edition, and I try to analyze with considering Hawktails to not fall into the same trap, because classless is my approach. So I was like, oh, what the heck went wrong with third edition? One of the main problems you ran into when you have that system where you start picking classes, that there are two issues. One is that classes come front loaded with a bunch of stuff you get for first level, and then they sprinkled out through the rest of your career. That's one problem. So if you choose a lot of first level classes from many classes, then you become overpowered, so to speak. But the other issue is that each class give you like number of uses per day of this, and then you pick another class and you get another two issues per long rest or something like that of things, and that means that you pick up enormous amount of uses. So the way I tried to solve that was to have a meta currency, exertion. So you use exertion to use all sorts of features. So if you're a little bit of laying on hams, and then you have some cleric spells and some other stuff, they will, a lot of it will use the same base resources, exertion. So even if you have 10 different features, you still only have this much exertion, and you have to divide it up.
We're getting off the race discussion here, by the way, and going into addition discussion.
That's true. Yeah.
The only thing I would say to tie that up, and because I do want to move on to specific races.
Yeah. But demi-humans are kind of key in when it comes to multi-classing from the get-go. So yeah.
Yeah, the thing I agree with Sam. My one point would be though that in third is also when you started to see. Well, you see it in second. But I think by the time you have third and that emphasis on player, that shift towards players, you wind up, at least in my experience, in my observation, you wind up with, how can I put it, more investment in character, or a different kind of investment in character in third.
Yeah.
Like, people get legitimately upset if their low-level character dies before they get to 10th and get all these superpowers.
Yeah. The term build is invented probably somewhere around there, I guess. Yeah.
I would say probably earlier, but not.
Probably kit era of second edition. I think that word
starts.
It starts creeping out. That's why I don't like. That's why I don't do kits. I do all back converted to 1E classes. So, all right. So let me just discuss this real quick as far as. Greyhawk has the flexibility for a lot of options of classes, right? Yeah. With races. I'm sorry, races. There are more than you think. And in my old age, I've gotten a little flexible in stuff that I would never have done. And of course, my guys yell at me. They're like, "You're too easy on those special groups you have. You wouldn't let us do that." Where? And that sounds like, well, yeah, you're absolutely correct. I'll give you an example. So here's Korg's character, Maram Sormir. He comes to me with an idea. I want to play this half-orc who is in Altamira, and he's been a guard all these years, but now he's older, and he's tired of doing that, and he wants to become a monk. He wants to become, I was like, wow, that's a cool idea. Well, half-orcs can't become monks in my game. All right, here's our solution. We're going to make you 25% orcish, so you have human traces, but you look at, you got the Fu Manchu, right? You got the character here and all, but that way it works into the rules, but you can call yourself half-orc all you want or whatever. I don't care, So in the old days, I would never do something like this. So now look, he's a dual-class human, 3rd level fighter, 7th level monk now. He just leveled up. What a weird, bizarre class, But I'm just saying, 20 years ago, I wouldn't do this. I would not be that flexible. And I think that that's something I've learned over the years. I won't do this with my guys still, because here's the difference.
Poor guys.
Well, I'm going to tell you why. These players are thinking at it for how the character can be RP'd and how the character can be interacted in the story. My guys are thinking, because sorry, Tim. Sorry, I know Alan's not watching. Sorry, Tim, and any of you out there. How can they abuse the system to their advantage?
Yep.
That's just it. I mean, we've gone through it. And third edition was that.
Yeah, that's a really important distinction, or like distinction, because some players play it because it's a game. Some players play it because it's fun to tell stories together, and none of those are wrong. The pure game way of playing it is not wrong, and if you want to have a stand-up poetry club talking, right, that's not wrong either. The problem is that on that spectrum, if you're too far apart, you might not like to play together at the same table with the same DM, so to speak. That's where you should be kind of aware of the where on the spectrum you want your game to be, so to speak.
I just want to interject too that there's also something we're not considering about, particularly say 0 and first, at least as they were intended, at least rules as written. There was an emphasis past a certain point on domain play, for whatever that meant. Maybe you became a tavern keeper, maybe you built a castle, maybe you started a thieves guild. But the point is that at a certain level, even humans level off. Like, when you look through the NPCs, and even if you look through the PCs in the Rogues Gallery, for example, and knowing that those were still statted up and they weren't necessarily written up as played, but you'll notice that the levels are nowhere near. There aren't a lot of 15th level so-and-sos running around.
Yeah.
And I try to encourage that in my own campaign. The idea that, sooner or later on a long enough timeline, you're going to draw the attention, or you can be Johnny Badass, but you're going to draw the attention of, it's that gunfighter syndrome, right?
Yeah.
You're going to be the fastest gun until another fastest gun, someone is drawn to you to prove that they're the fastest gun. And sooner or later, you're not going to draw on time.
Well,
or there's going to be a conspiracy launched against you. So maybe it behooves you to retire.
Yeah, but I was thinking from when it comes to races or your biology, like Jay and Les, do you say that all the stuff that they come with, you get it at first level, so to speak? So you get, like, for instance, your drow innate magic, or is that something that will evolve over time if you had a gnome or
when Unearthed Arcana came out, the Dark Elf females, I mean, Dark Elves got 3 spells right off the bat. When they turned 4th, they got others, and then females got a little bit more beyond that. So that's they did do that a little bit. You got no magic resistance beyond the surface world. So there was some. Hey Tim, there was some of that. But
I try to in Hawktails. What I do, I have traits that comes with your ancestry, so to speak, meaning race. So you have traits. You have to pay for them in XP. You can learn them automatically, but you have to pay for them, so to speak. So they if you learn them, they will come with something else, and that can be extra stuff. Meaning, as an elf, for instance, you get like low light vision, but you can get dark vision that way, for instance. Or some gnomes, for instance, might learn innate illusion spells and stuff like that. So they will come at a cost. They will replace something else. Or you have to have a higher XP start budget. I might simply say you get more XP when you start your character to purchase these things or to use them, so to speak. So
I was going to say this is an ideal moment, since we've mentioned gnomes like 4 or 5 times now.
Yeah, sure.
To leap into the gnome discussion.
Exactly. We need to.
Why not? Sure. Where do you want me to go, Les?
First off, let's look at the Gnomish Point of View article.
61. The first ever dragon I bought myself.
Nice.
That's how I know it. Yep.
And we're going to be doing something a little bit different here. What I proposed earlier was a bit of like almost pop culture archaeology, to kind of look at how the gnome developed, right? I mean, this is I think one of the articles that helped codify for a lot of people. The Point of View and God articles are kind of the things that helped codify for a lot of people what these races were about, right?
Roger Moore should get a commendation for all this.
Oh yes, definitely. They are fantastic. Yeah. Especially when you consider how old they were, how long ago they were, how little that was published when he wrote them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But if we look at this article, I'm going to draw attention to something that might not necessarily stand out to people, right?
Please do.
Let me pull down to it. Let's see. Go to the very end of the article.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe you'll find something. If it's not there, then
right
it's
here?
Kind of going to be suggested. Yeah.
Material?
Yeah.
Player's Handbook, Monster Manual, Dungeon Master's Guide to Easy Demigods, three Hearts and 3 Lines. You've said that multiple times on multiple shows. Paul Anderson and Enchanted Pilgrimage by
Clifford Simak.
I've never even heard of that.
Clifford Simak was a very famous and prolific writer of science fiction, but he also wrote some fantasy, and he wrote some books that are right on the edge. Now, Enchanted Pilgrimage is a book I'm going to recommend. Jay, if you have, could you also open up Dragon 59?
Yeah,
I believe it is.
I'm prepared for all the stuff you suggested here, so
I'm going to point out that Roger, when Roger was doing his just before it, so this is just before that article was published, right?
Right. Doesn't this one have halflings in it?
No, that's not what I'm particularly interested in. Go to the Giants in the Earth article.
Ah. What page? What page? Oh, I see 11.
Yeah. Okay, now go down. Now you see that guy,
Harold Shea.
No, and then after him.
Oh, after him.
Other direction, yeah.
Anthony Villiers.
After him, it should be the next two are the ones you're going to be looking at.
Mark Cornwall.
Yep, and notice what book he's from. Enchanted Pilgrimage.
Oh, okay.
And you see the little guy standing next to him?
No.
Go to the next entry. Next page.
Snively Whiplash. Huh. I wonder if that's where they got his name from for the cartoon even.
Don't know.
Snively Whiplash.
I can tell you that Snively, the take on gnomes in this book is especially interesting, right? Basically, the gnomes in this book don't have they're long lived, but they don't have a culture based on literacy. Theirs is an oral culture. They tell stories.
Okay.
And what this means is that their memory is not necessarily doesn't go back as long as humans do. So they're an old race that actually feels like a new race in comparison to the humans. However, any kind of weird mythical creature that you run across while you're crossing this mythic wasteland in the novel, Snively inevitably has knowledge of it. Because, oh yeah, I heard a story about this. And the other thing that he does is he enchants weapons. And you'll notice also there's some reference to illusion magic. This is one of the bases, I think, for the. You'll notice that this article was published. This write-up on Snively was published just a few issues before the Gnomish Point of View article.
Right. It's 82.
The Gnomish Point of View article.
It's 82. So there is no multi-classing fighter illusionist before this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but okay.
And this goes back to a little background. Like I believe one of the first known literary occurrences of the term gnome.
Yeah, right, and this it looks like
it's in the works of Paracelsus. Paracelsus was an alchemist from the Middle Ages, right?
Right.
And he associated the gnome as a kind of elemental spirit, a spirit associated with the earth and with the element of earth. What you wind up with by the time you get on, what I was going to say was, if you look at, for example, the original box set has gnomes listed as monsters, right?
Yeah.
But when you get to Supplement 1, Greyhawk, it's implied you have your rock gnomes and so forth, or you don't have your rock gnomes yet. What you have is mountain dwarves, hill dwarves, and the gnomes are basically listed as a third sort of dwarf.
Right. Okay.
By the time you get to the first Greyhawks, Rob Kuntz and Gary Gygax Greyhawk supplement.
I guess maybe this is where artificing.
Well, the cousin thing really comes up in the Monster Manual.
Yeah.
Curiously enough, it's like they shift from being a subset. They shift from being a monster, a non-player race, to, well, you can have them as a player race, but they're a subset of dwarves, to, well, they're cousins to the regular dwarves.
Right.
To having a fleshed out mythology via the articles and so forth, and deities and demigods. So you have a more fleshed out kind of point of view. They start developing, and there's a kind of interesting, if you look at the article anyway, I think that you find some interesting little nuggets about the nature of the gnomes. And this would be, like I said, what I see there is more is building on the loose framework that's already been provided, right? And he's making. Oh, by the way, my other bit of evidence about that would be Dragon number 7. Of all things.
Yeah, you know what? So I can't recall me ever opening this dragon. So this is going to be a new experience for me. I don't think I've ever looked through Dragon 7.
The Gnome Cache.
Yeah.
Part 7 of the Gnome Cache by Gygax.
Mm-hmm.
Where you have.
that was the one written in under pseudonym, right?
No, this was a serialized novel that Gygax was publishing.
Okay.
He never finished it.
Oh.
Okay. And what you'll find is near the end of this chapter, right, because it ends on a cliffhanger, you see toad-like beings and frogs. Yes, this would imply Wastri. Chasing a dwarf. Now, given the title of the work, there's been speculation that this dwarf would have been, in fact, a gnome, right?
Okay.
So here, and by the way, it's kind of neat because it's one of the first appearances of the whole frog cult, Wastri, hopping prophet madness stuff. But it's really interesting to see that that's probably the Gnome Cache had the story, and we know that the manuscript still exists, by the way.
Oh, really?
So the rest of it exists.
Who's that? GameHoleCon has it.
Someone has it. I know it, or it's part of the estate. One of the two. Pardon, but
sorry.
But yeah, you'll notice. There you go, dude. At the end there, the picture.
Wow, I wonder who did that artwork. Hey, nice.
And what happens, at any rate, I was going to mention is that when you get to books like and we don't have to go to the specific books, but when you get to books like the Complete Book of Humanoids, and later the 3rd edition Races books, 3.5 Races books, you'll notice that there's a kind of neat thing that I think that was added, a layer of complication that was added to the gnome, which is the idea that they have kind of split natures. They are creatures who go into the earth, but they love the surface and they love plants. And they, to some extent, in my campaign, they'll bring some of that plant life with them, and have like enchanted gardens underground where they have,
they can use a light spell or something like that too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And various types of illusions, perhaps.
Yeah.
To call to earth, to mine the surface. But one of the things that I find interesting about it is that it mentions that this, in particularly in the 3.5 stuff, it mentions the idea of having the gnomes, and this is kind of hinted at in the Complete Book from 2nd edition. Okay. But it hints at the idea that they see elves as too focused. They feel a kinship to elves on a certain level, but they are also kind of, elves just are so much of the moment, and if you will, of the surface things, whereas the gnomes see the surface things as, there's a reason that they're tricksters. The surface is a constantly changing, the world, I mean, that's what I mean by surface. This changing world is almost like Maya in Buddhism or something, right? It's a constantly shifting illusion itself, which is why gnomes find illusion magic fascinating. They see this world as almost a veil for the truth that underlies reality. And you can see almost a connection there between them being creatures who love the sun and love the changing seasons, and yet they dig. And they go where there are no seasons, right? Underground. So it's like basically a weird area between dwarf and elf, right?
Yeah.
And they have their own personalities that way, where they see kinship. At least this is a change from the 1st edition racial chart, but I think it makes sense. There's also that kind of feeling, kind of relationship that they have with creatures who are hybrid, creatures who are mixed, because they see them as in some way reflecting their own split nature, if that makes sense. Like they're creatures who will go underground, and they do make like jewelry and things like that, but it's not for the same reasons, right? That dwarves do. Dwarves do it for mastery. And this becomes a big theme in my campaign. We mentioned last time the piece I had written for Oath Journal about the Swan May and her relationship with that ranger, and the idea that if you could change form, that gives you a different perspective on what existence means from something that has a fixed form, right? Or predominantly has a fixed form. So it becomes so in that case it becomes another question of mastery. You become and also fear of mastery. Like if you're something that you don't want to be someone's lab experiment, you don't want to be the thing that someone sees as something to be studied or as a curiosity or freak. So they have that kind of split nature thing, and I think the gnomes are a great example of that. They're often nowadays portrayed after the Critical Role thing as
sexual deviance,
horny bards.
Yeah.
But even the trickster thing, I think, has an underlying seriousness to it, if that makes sense. Because again, their illusions are kind of showing up the fact that this world is a changeable and unstable place. They're long lived enough to know that, and unlike the elves, they aren't particularly. I don't want to say this. Yeah, I will say it. That the gnomes probably suspect the elves are a bit superficial. They're a bit shallow.
Yeah.
And so I kind of like that. And also, you'll notice again with traps, there's that idea of and I don't want to say tinker, but we'll say, I don't have a problem with the idea of gnomes devising elaborate traps for a few reasons. One would be their enmity with goblins and kobolds, and the fact that Glittergold tricked the kobold god. The kobolds are still pretty sore about that. And these are creatures, goblins and kobolds, who are known for their cunning and their traps and stuff. It makes sense to me that, if you will, to use internet parlance, the gnomes even pwned the kobolds and goblins when it comes to that game. So they have these Ruth Goldberg devices that the kobolds and goblins couldn't dream up. Because they're more intelligent, let's face it. And the kobolds can't stand this. The goblins can't stand this. And so they have a kind of sense. There's also, I think, in the 3.5 book, it mentions that they don't really differentiate magic and mechanical aspects of traps, right? To them, it's just nature. It's just you manipulating the physical world, which itself is a changeable place. So as long as you don't lean too heavily into and you can, mind you, that's a DM choice, but as long as you don't lean too heavily into that idea of giant mech running around or something, you can certainly have a mechanically inclined. We tend to think of mechanics in terms of like machine, like I don't know, mecha or something like that, or cars or something. But bear in mind that like traps are mechanical devices. Clockwork type things are mechanical devices. These are things that I can see gnomes very easily coming up with, and to some extent doing so almost as a joke, if that makes sense, but a joke with a serious punchline.
Well, in Dragonlance, that's almost all they do. They're all tinkers in Dragonlance, right?
Yeah, but I'm saying that this is a little bit different. This is not that kind of tinkering, because in there again, it's taken to an absurd level, and it's almost played for comedic effect.
Yeah.
Whereas in my take on gnomes, if you look at the way that they view the world, right? Their point is that everything that you see is changeable and might not be what you see tomorrow or how you see it tomorrow. So their traps kind of play off of that. There's a kind of underlying sadness or poignancy or at times lethality to their sense of humor. In that way, they're very much kind of creatures. Going back to what I'd said in an earlier episode about the Fae and the Fae kind of having a brutal sense of humor, I think you can see a little bit of that with the gnomes.
I've always seen gnomes on the fringe of the Greyhawk plot lines. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, but all the demi-humans are on the fringes.
I'm not sure about that.
Well, let's see. Geller and
well, the gnomes are the little evil helpers. That's in a lot of sense.
Well, yeah, you do have the outcast gnomes, which that third edition book goes into.
Well, no, I mean, there's evil gnomes in frickin' White Plume Mountain.
But that goes towards. But here, this will be my other thing. Going to modules where there are gnomes, I mentioned Sojkamp, and you'll notice that the lair is very carefully booby trapped.
Oh yeah,
there in case defenses go. Again, the idea of traps and tricks. But with the gnomes of White Plume Mountain is a funhouse dungeon, right? Meaning it doesn't have your normal kind of ecology where things make sense. Of course, that's going to appeal to an evil gnome. Of course, that kind of environment and its creator or master is going to have some appeal to a crazy gnome, right?
Yep.
Because it seems completely illogical. it'll appeal to the gnome sense of absurdity.
I'll give you. Yeah.
And also, I was going to mention Gord and Gelor visiting, I believe, one of the gnomish kings in to keep him in the loop in Saga of Old City. So they do tie in.
Also, if you go to the Slavers reference, there's a bunch of evil ones in Wyvernon working with that dwarven evil priest of Hexter.
Yep. Exactly.
To kill, to thwart off humanoids.
And that's a good example of what we were saying earlier about the evil versus evil. The lesser evil fighting the greater evil. Because you got these crazy gnomes and dwarves and.
Yeah. So that's a fringe one, but it's good to discuss, because they're all over. Gnomes are in a lot of places. So I think they're probably
less fringe for me. Obviously, the thing is that we know that there are populations. You have them in the Cairn Hills, you have them in the Aberals, you have them up in
Cron Hills.
Cron Hills. You've got them up around Knurl. And my players have been trapped in an abandoned gnome compound before, and I will say that my players, by the end of it, they were saying those damn gnomes rather, because the traps were intact. Some of them hadn't been triggered, and so as they're trying to escape from the people who've taken over that compound, they find the back way out, right? But the back way out is completely booby trapped and maze-like. And it has clues that only a gnome can decipher, and unfortunately, they didn't have any gnomes with them. So they had to try and take their best guesses at what some of the clues meant. And, humiliating, the traps were not only, some of the traps were not only lethal, but they were kind of vaguely humiliating. In that, they couldn't help but laugh that their characters were getting torn up this way, while going, damn it, at the same time. I don't want to spoil anything because I'm going to use gnomish traps like that again. But again, it's the thing where, in a way, I don't want to overemphasize this, but you can play gnomes a number of ways. You can play it where there's an underlying sadness and poignancy to their worldview while they're cracking jokes or while they seem to be smiling and friendly. You can play it where they're more inclined to the humor because they don't like thinking about the rest, but they're still in pursuit of the truth. They're still in pursuit of deeper universal truths. Yeah, and to some extent, I think they're also capable of some degree of empathy based on that. So
cool.
That'd be one thing.
So as much as making a trust, I think they build trust with glee. Well, yeah, probably.
Yeah,
probably.
I think to some extent, it's again, the dwarves do things for mastery. For being able to say, I built it, we built this is here. Gnomes, it's more about process.
Okay.
And it's more about understand. In other words, I understand how this thing functions, and I'm going to make something that functions this way. But mine's going to be different because I'm going to do this other thing and put it together. So it's a little bit different. And I don't think they particularly. I mean, let's face it. I mean, look at Glittergold and the Kobold God, right? It's like, well, once he's trapped, you don't care to see him again. It's just the fact that you trapped him, right? Yeah. It's the process of poning them, if you will.
One of my arch...
And you're welcome, Ken.
The arch antithesis for my campaign for over 15 years was a gnome. So there you go.
Yeah.
But gnomes are probably the least played out of all the options in my campaign for PC races. I'd say even less than half ogres. So
same, and I think that's kind of a shame because I think that it's, again, they get written off as either, well, why couldn't I just play a dwarf, as if there's no difference between the two, or they're written off nowadays as, perverts basically, because of the, they're kind of sexual sleep around beings.
Well, yeah. Well, I do have
Phil. Of the live stream
I do have Darling's character Phil Mathany in my game, who's a gnome. So you can just imagine, right? So there you go. So
that's a little bit different, man. That's a whole gnome fascination, right?
Yeah. All times. That's just a lot of that is from Dux Ex Machina from the one. That the bard, the gnome bard.
Vox Scanlan, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that comes from there. So,
But to be fair, I don't blame them any more than I blame Salvatore for Drizzt. It's like it's just something that caught on in the public consciousness, and the next thing you know, just as you have a dozen fucking drow rangers at every table.
Well,
you now have 2 million horny gnome bards wandering the multiverse.
Yeah. I'll say this about that. I have no problem with Drizzt, however you say it at all. My problem with Salvatore is I feel like I'm watching, a bad TV show because no one ever dies permanently in that stupid world. They always come back, and it got old quick. Artemis and Trey came back like 12 times, and that was enough for me. I'm like, my God, just freaking kill him.
But that's even a separate argument from the one that's usual, which is that people hate the fact that there are so many Drow Rangers with Panther sidekicks after Drizzt.
Well, yeah, it's because people are followers. I understand that, but Dark Elves were cool before that, and that's why I always say D3, and that's another. We talk about race and Greyhawk. D3 is the go-to. It's the go-to Bible for Dark Elves and Greyhawk. Not sorry, Ed, not Menzo Baronson, not Drizzt. That's not Dark Elf. Dark Elves are not these, freaking parkour ninjas running around with a weapon in each hand and no penalties. They used to fight weapon and buckler, right? That's what they used to fight. They were. It's just it got out of hand quick. And that was a shame. So it's like I try and.
Well, I like it. I like the Drow that came out of it. I think it was. I think it's a good example of a good idea evolved into even better, even cooler things. So yeah. So I like it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
See, it's one of those things where going back to what I was saying, I don't object to people doing it.
It's like
or
the D&D itself. Meaning, I feel that the editions overall have given me more cool things to do with it, so to speak, and I've loved them all, including 5e and even 4e to some extent. And none of them are my favorite anymore, but they're still all lovely in their own way, so to speak.
Oh, I agree, but I would also add that to me, at least, it's one of those things where if I'm looking for that Greyhawk flavor or that old school flavor, the Realms has evolved past a point where it's recognizably old school at all. Right. And Greyhawk itself, was the first setting that I really got into with RPGs, and I can see I loved the way that it was like I've said this before, it's a kitchen sink setting in that it borrows from various different pulp sources ranging from Edgar Rice Burroughs to Howard to Tolkien. It can borrow from more contemporary fantasy like Black Company or even Game of Thrones or Song of Ice and Fire. But the thing is that it still is its own distinct thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of worry once you start introducing your Drow Rangers and as Jay puts it, the parkour elves, you run the risk at times of diluting that and making it something. It becomes too close to other settings and what can be accomplished with.
Hey, DM Shane coming in, Encounter Online. Good to see you.
Hello.
Good to thank you very much for the raid. This is a great topic. We're talking race in the Greyhawk setting. Races of Greyhawk. We're going all over the place. We're bouncing around. I got Anna Meyer and Leslie Reno with me tonight, and we're just chatting up this discussion on our Wednesday Night Legends and Lore. Feel free to participate. Giveaway ! Drawing classic D&D reprint of some sort. I am giving away your choice. So thank you so very much for hopping in here. Love it. I'm trying to. Whoops! I was trying to put in.
I will say, by the way, because this segues nicely into dwarves. I think.
Sure, let's do
it. In my campaign, one of the things that I've introduced is depending on where the dwarves and gnomes are, right? If they're in a fairly secure and isolated location where it takes a while to get to them, they might not have this. But if it's a settlement where where humans are likely to visit and they have had some bad experiences with humans in the past, then they have what are called I'm trying to remember the term of it. Basically, the idea is they're called outer homes, right? And what the outer homes are is it's basically a gnomish or dwarvish compound where they receive guests and where trade is conducted, etc. The reason they do that, particularly with the dwarves view their children as sacred, right?
Right. No, I know where you're coming on this, because I got this. I got the same thing set up in Altamira. That's their trade place. That's not where their base is. No, I understand that exactly. 100%. 100%.
And also, you'll 100%. Find like there are tunnels that connect that to the main places.
Hold on one sec.
But then the tunnels are what tend to be booby trapped or otherwise, protected. So if they have to beat a retreat, they and if they have honored guests, can be skedaddle out of there.
Let's see. Yeah. No. The entire Dwarven Quarter in the city is meant for that purpose, which is I appreciate you bringing that up. Yeah, because a lot of the dwarves are I see dwarves as can be secretive, but there's different types of secretive in Greyhawk, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. You can have your dwarves that are, let me close out some of these. I got too much open here. All right, so there we go. Let me go to the map back here. All right.
Humor.
You actually have a Dwarven Kingdom, the Principality of Ulick. So, and that's who knows what the difference between a Hill Dwarf and a Mountain Dwarf is. Right,
I just see it as something that the Great Kingdom scholars thought that these big live in the big hills and these live in the little hills, and there's some difference. So they just studied that. That's how I interpret it. It's a term they used when they wrote it up. I don't think it's more a different class, probably a slightly different culture and a little bit different ideas on things. But I don't think there's like two types of dwarfs that are sprinkled around evenly or unevenly across Greyhawk, so to speak. Nah.
See, with that, I would say,
but the Dwergar is a different beast.
Oh, absolutely. Altogether.
Yes, yeah, they're different beasts
absolutely.
Altogether. Yeah.
Again, I would go with the distinction that's made, like both in the original Monster Manual and to some extent in second edition's Complete Book of Dwarves. Where there's a kind of claim on the part of mountain dwarves that they're the superior dwarves, they're the first dwarves, right? And all other dwarves, including the Duergar and the hill dwarves, are their descendants. Like I like that idea that you have, in the same way that you have elves that are of different orders and see themselves differently, and see themselves as superior.
It's like Sewell see themselves as we are the superior humans.
Yeah, the mountain dwarves, I kind of like the idea because they and also mountain dwarves tend to be more isolationist.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean that they are. It's just that they view themselves that way.
Yeah, well, I mean, there is a slight physical difference. They're lighter. The mountain dwarves, at least as written, tend to have lighter skin. And
now we're getting into, I think, the really difficult territory.
Well, it's no more. It's no more to me than like elvish hair color and things like that. It's like because
but once if it's stereotyped, then it becomes the problem. But it only falls one way. Yeah,
right. But
I want to address that right quick because there are two ways that you can approach that, right?
Yeah.
One is to see it as a stereotype. The second is to possibly interrogate the stereotype by seeing it as, and again, there's no right answer to this, right? I've seen people who I consider to be utterly brilliant debate this back and forth. But with that kind of thing, you have the idea that the other races, the non-human races, are closer to archetypes than they are to actual human beings. If that makes sense. They're more representative of psychological or natural forces and the way that those forces can be interpreted. You'll notice that almost all the demi-human races are associated with elemental things, right? You have them associated with earth to varying degrees. You have them associated with water, with the sea elves. You have them associated with, it gets into the elemental and para-elemental kind of combinations as well. So it's a matter of, to me, they're not, and again, they have that degree of fixity in terms of alignment as originally written. I don't see them. It's a weird thing where I see them. If this makes sense, I see them as characters. I don't see them as individually psychologized.
No, hang on a second. I just want to say one thing. I'm not looking at this case specifically. I'm seeing if we have a tendency of everything that is like more white or something is
no, I don't.
more good. Then
just
it becomes
Les was just bringing up.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying that Les or this case. I'm
one
saying
around the sun more, so they
yeah.
You know, they're outside.
The only thing I'm saying is that if everything falls into old stereotypes, then it becomes a problem.
So I'll solve this real quick.
Yeah,
I see it politically in my game. All right, the Hill Dwarves of the Principality of Ulick do not like the Mountain Dwarves of the Lort Mills because they have different agendas.
Mm-hmm.
All right,
that works.
All right, and the Prince of Ulick, who's a Hill Dwarf, has two, and they're writing my algebra book, two groups of bandits that are dwarves that have letters of marque from the prince that will raid mountain dwarves and raid the city of Altamira, and there you go. And that's
things like that. I think it's perfect. Yeah, that works. That works.
Yeah,
really
well. And that way, I don't have to differentiate between racial
and it doesn't tie
things.
into anything in the real world. So
exactly.
Then it's perfectly fine. Yes,
exactly.
Then I'm.
I'll give you another example. And we talk about this. The Sylvan Elves of the Narwhal, the Gnarly Forest, and the Welkwood, and all have clans. They're clannish, kind of like the Mirkwood, elves. Whereas whereas the Grey Elves of Selene we're noble. We have a noble structure. There difference in there.
Yep.
I don't even go into. All right, so maybe they're a little shorter. Someone else slightly shorter than a Grey Elf. Okay, so be it.
Well, half foot taller with mountain, and somewhat different skin tones, which makes sense because of various other things.
Yeah, but I like to apply the racial difference between elves and between each dwarves or whatever based on a political aspect of the game. In my game.
But see, this would be the thing is that with that, I would say that the politics enters into it in terms of how it's an interaction. Another thing to keep in mind is whether or not how can I put this? How big a role that plays? Are we just talking physical differentiation, or are we talking that there's some inherent character that's associated with the physical differentiation?
Both. I don't see a problem with that.
Because I just say, okay, they generally have this color hair, right?
Yeah, well,
and this color eyes. Okay, well, is there anything associated? Again, it's one of those things where I don't know if there's a one-to-one correspondence between hill dwarves and mountain dwarves and any particular group. Real world. I know that there's a case that's been made about dwarves in general, but that's because of some later developments, specifically in the 19th century culturally. So I'm not quite so sure.
I don't think there's need to go there though.
Yeah, I don't think there is either.
No.
To tell you the truth.
Yeah.
I didn't bring it up, but yeah.
No, I think the best way to look at different differences, if people don't want to go there based on I'm not even saying that this is what's at racial superiority or anything like that, is looking at the political aspects of how it pertains to your game. And that's just it. I know Anna has a different thing with me completely on elves. Completely different. But
then you can play it a lot of ways. It's me. I'm going off the rails, so to speak.
And see, with this, I was going to say, because this ties into the wider themes in my campaign as well. Mm-hmm. I agree with Chris T.S. in that if you're, how can I put it, going off of physical appearances and racial stereotype, then that can be a bad thing, unless that's how characters in world view it. And by that I mean a mountain dwarf who sees a hill dwarf might feel kind of attention that a human might not. To a human, they might be all dwarves, right? From the dwarven perspective, they might see that as a caste thing or something else. They might have, in other words, race might be a function within your campaign. It just depends on how you want to play it. But certainly culture and politics are larger aspects, and economics are larger aspects of that.
Another
so
example.
I don't want to make it sound like. I don't want to make it sound like my emphasis is on.
No.
Right, the question was, there's not really any difference between them. I'm like, well, yeah. A, they see themselves, they're physically different somewhat, at least as described, and B, their emphasis is slightly different, if that makes sense. The mountain dwarves tend to be isolationist and dig deeper, and yeah, I mean there are certain cultural differences that express themselves as well. So
Absolutely.
yeah, I mean you can play it any way you want to.
In the area of my campaign in Altamira, 90% of the dwarves are mountain dwarves, believe it or not, in the city. 10% are hill. It's just the way it is. So, and that falls on political aspects of most dwarves that join the Order of Ulick are mountain dwarves, not hill dwarves in this area.
Now, one thing I do want to bring up culturally, and I kind of took this idea. Of course, there's the idea that Mordorin, or the god, breathed life into them, right? That they were a work that he crafted and breathed life into. In my campaign, one of the recurring motifs for dwarves is that, and I mentioned that value on children, that complete book of dwarves kind of emphasizes that, and it kind of suggests that dwarves see their children as things that have been crafted, right?
Okay.
And so what in my campaign, one of the things that is, because marriage is a big thing in the dwarven culture, at least according to the complete book of dwarves and some other things. It's the linking of clans. It can be the linking of bloodlines. It can be done for political reasons. There are all kinds of trade reasons. There are all kinds of significances to marriage, right? In a dwarven society. But when a child is conceived, my idea was that the mingling of the breath of the partners is a kind of iteration of Mordorin breathing life into the first dwarf.
Cool.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that the mingled breath is what animates to them their child. And then for the dwarves, the way they see it is that a child who goes astray is a great thing of shame, in much the same way but worse than if you were crafting some great work in metal and you screwed it up, or it came out wrong for whatever reason.
Okay.
That's how they tend to view dwarves that have gone wrong, because they tend to be highly utilitarian, right? So I don't know if that makes any kind of sense, but I kind of like that as a mythic kind of account of the sacredness of the bond of marriage within dwarven kind, and also the way that it relates to the way that dwarves see their children.
Okay. Why don't we give a shout out here to Len and go to his article in the Dragon, Lehman's Tiny Hut?
Absolutely.
Which one?
105.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, and let's just talk about this.
And this will be the Everything Old is New Again article for me. Basically, what the article is about, it's about tapping the new races that had been introduced in Unearthed Arcana because they might be overpowered. You'll notice that there's a complaint that's been made that when you introduce Genasi or Aasimar or
in a 5e setting,
in a 5e setting, these races are horribly overpowered, right? What's amusing is that this was a problem going all the way back to UA when it introduced the Drow and the Duragar and the Sverfnevelin, etc. And that's what Leonard's article here is trying to address themselves.
Well, you got to remember, there are a lot of races that people don't even realize were introduced as playable character races in our Arcana. Dark Elf, Deep Gnome, Duragar, Wild Elf, Valley Elf. Right? Am I missing any? I think that's it. There's a lot.
Grugach.
Grugach is Wild Elf. Yeah.
Yeah. Valley Elves, so forth.
Yeah.
You got. Basically, he's introduced a lot of options, and some of them, as he points out, they were originally introduced.
Yeah. I think
they were introduced in the monster manual, or in some cases in modules as monsters, right? Some of these races. And now, courtesy of UA, they are
playable.
But the problem is that they were, of course, meant to be challenging opponents to the player, right? but now the player is the challenging creature. So the question is, how do you balance that out?
Right. Oh no, this is a great article because so what I did was I scrubbed some of them completely. Nix Grey Dwarves, Nix Deep Gnomes. Kept Dark Elves in because I thought it was a cool thing to add into the game, and it made a lot more sense. Valley Elves, I don't see no reason for a player character to play a Valley Elf. I mean, it's in the game, they're in the Valley of the Mage, but no one knows why still.
But
no one can tell me.
One of the most Greyhawkish, the most Greyhawkish of this, because it's a race that only exists in Greyhawks.
But it doesn't. But it does, Anna, but it's not a Greyhawk race because no one knows anything about it.
It is a Greyhawk because it's so firmly rooted in the setting. It's never been developed as a
exactly
race. Yeah, but that's more like meaning it's there to be fixed, so to speak, if you want. And it's up to your campaign. But it's something to be considered. Yes, definitely, very much so.
Les, you want to continue on? I mean, this thing talks about like some of the things here, illusion. Because I said, Grey Dwarves are immune to illusions. Making changes here. Bright light penalties on Deep Gnomes. Bright light penalties on Dark Elf. I mean, there's a lot of just smart, common sense things you can do.
Yeah. And I think also, this would be a good example. Actually, all these elves, because they're so niche, right? They're good examples of what we were talking about in terms of introducing new races to your Greyhawk campaign, which is where do they fit in the setting?
Right, absolutely.
Like if you're running an Underdark campaign, if you want to run a straight up Airline Simlu or something else Underdark campaign, it's great to have the Drow and Snevelin and the Duergar as options, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're running yeah, and that's the thing is, but again, you have to take into consideration. And I was like, if you're running an Underdark campaign, you may not even want to remove those features from them. Because you might want to keep them as they are, depending on how your Underdark campaign is going to work out. But if you're going to have like suddenly like a party from basically a mixed party. And you've got the Drow walking around in daylight, and they still have all the abilities that the Drow have, and so on. That might lead to a kind of, mess, to put it bluntly, or to a character who winds up being the star of the show, right?
Yeah.
And you may want that, you may not want that. There's also, of course, the option of giving the character some kind of flaw or weakness. It's like, okay, you can have that, and this is typical in a lot of RPGs. You can have that feature, but but you're gonna have this drawback as well. You're gonna have this weakness that an enemy can exploit if they're aware of it, or if you wind up getting it triggered.
Len was such a stickler for the old ways that when something new came, even if it was done by Gary the book, he was always like, I need to figure out a way to pull this back a little bit. And that's what he does in these articles all the time. And he's like, critical hits and fumbles he hated, certain spells.
Well, yeah, and he was also someone who was firmly on the rules are the key bits, so to speak, playing.
Rules and tables.
He was less about the stories and the places and stuff. The rules were essential. If those weren't right, then Len didn't play. And you can tell because they have the right armor class and all the right stats on every NPC and everything. That was key for him, and that was his strength, so to speak. And that's like in everything. If we emphasize on one thing, then we get weaker in others. So
thanks, Patrick. Snow elves are native to Greyhawk. Yes, they are native to Greyhawk, Gary, because of wherever they appeared in. I forget where it was.
Dragon.
Yeah, it was Dragon. Yeah. So.
Uh-oh.
All right. So what should we go to next year, Len? I mean, oh my God, Len. I mean, Les. Oh my God. We all miss Les. We all miss Len. Oh my God, my brain.
Man. I miss Les too.
Sorry, my brain's off.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
But let's see. We've done the dwarves. We've done the thing. How about and I want to come back to elves.
Elves are a whole topic on themselves. So with the time frame we got, so let's go on to the offbeat. Yeah.
Yeah, let's go into offbeat. How do you guys feel about humanoids and half-orcs?
Well, I love half-orcs. I love half-orcs and half-ogres.
Well, they need to be part of they should be for certain campaigns. Should be the mainstay of play. So they need to be the stable of playable character for characters to choose to pick from. I need them in my rules, so to speak. Not for every campaign, but for some campaigns, definitely.
Agreed. I think now there's, and I always hate to sound like a stickler for this because it's a bit absurd, but half-orcs are not. How can I put it? Depending on where you are, they aren't necessarily that common. Like I can see where, like for example, the Pomage,
Hardby.
Bandit Kingdoms.
Hardby, there's like 10%. Yeah, 10% of the population is supposedly half-orc in Hardby, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. Yeah. Zeef, right? There's a lot of half-orcs in as well.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing is.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say again. It's one of those things where.
Oh, Patrick, thanks, man.
It's going to depend on the area that you're playing, and what the tone of the campaign is. And that gets right back to that touchy issue of where half-orcs come from, right? Which I would say you could either gloss it over or just acknowledge it and move on. Or you can do I suppose you could have, and I've actually toyed with that in my campaign, the idea that there can be humans who really dig orcs for whatever reason. But it's not like a common thing, I don't think. Largely because I tend to associate the orcs again with these kind of primal. They're the low rung of the primal forces. They're low rung boogeymen, if you will. They're the low rung of what a lot of humans are scared of. Now, in urban environments or in environments like Zeef, more cosmopolitan environments, they might be accepted. And that's another thing to think about too: is are you in a more cosmopolitan part of Greyhawk? Or are you in a part where there's more political tension and, for lack of a better term, isolationism or community defense? These are just things to think through, I think, when you're playing with the idea.
For me, I look at it this way: is I'm not pushing. I don't know. I hit the high button there. That was stupid. For me, I'm not pushing a half-orc onto anyone, right? But if they want to play one, like we just had with Korg playing, we made it work out. So he's quarter-orc monk. That's fine, and we can always make a reason behind it because I can just see that happening in my area of the world, especially with the Pomage nearby and the Wild Coast and the Cis Forest. I can see it happening, right? I can see that, the half-orcs being a half-orc being brought up somewhere is not out of the crazy norm for where my game mostly is. So,
well, I mentioned even in my campaign there is that half-orc. I always think of her as a librarian, but essentially she was raised by one of the folks from the College of Wizardry in Greyhawk. And her main thing is that she now is involved in smuggling rare books right out of the Bone March, like going through ruins and stuff and trying to find these texts that might have value. And so the general thing with that would be she's like incredibly bookish. She's the not what you would expect a half-orc to be, if that makes sense. And she tends to speak like this. Where you can tell that she's seriously giving thought to what her next phrase is going to be.
Yep.
So she's very thoughtful, and she's an anomaly, like I said. But then again, I like characters who are against. This will sound weird. It's good that you can only play against type if there is a type to play against. So I think that to some extent, some of these general outlines of what characters are like or races are like can be useful in that then you can have deviations from them.
Right. No, I agree. So and like it's not like that they don't exist in lore. Like
Yeah,
there is
exactly.
one of the guild masters of Greyhawk City is a half orc. Who is it?
Oh God, my mind just went blank, and I used him.
Audience, yeah, one of my favorites. I have it so much that you can bribe him with cheesecakes.
Oh yeah,
Yes. Anyone know a half orc guild master in Greyhawk? Well,
on the tip of my brain, but it's been so long since I used him.
The Gravediggers and Embalmers Guild.
Exactly, yeah.
Selzek Gobayek.
Yeah.
That was the name. I forgot the name. Yep.
Likes having a multitude of races, but I always felt that the game sayings never had enough niches for these races to develop. Ron, that's a good point. And here's the thing: I just said I won't force it. That doesn't mean. Thanks, Curtis. That doesn't mean you cannot not have NPCs to give them a little jolt or a little, what would it be called? Starter fluid, and I do that all the time. I have humanoid NPCs, so that's something that is yeah. A lot of people forget that.
Well, I think that also with that, one of the cool things you can do. I brought her up before, so I guess, but I guess she's relevant to this discussion. Tieflings have undergone a lot of changes since they were first introduced in 2nd edition, right?
Right.
Used to be like just basically your fiend, plain touch but fiendish, as opposed to a Cambion or something. A Tiefling has somewhere back in its ancestry. It has, the essence of a fiend.
Right. And I real quick, I don't think a Tiefling is on the same power level as an Alu Demon or a Cambion, by the way. Right?
No.
Okay.
With 5th edition, they kind of tweaked that a little, and they made it into someone whose ancestor had, I'll put it as euphemistically as they did, had been suffused with the essence of Asmodeus. That's a polite way of putting it. Or like, or they later modified that to include any of the Lords of the Nine or powerful devils, right?
Well, yeah, because I see it that some of these like humanoids and then Drow and others, if your hapless people, if they succumb to a cult of follow a demon lord or something, that will physically and psychologically alter you. That's how I see it.
Someone had made I'm saying, set up how I played this out in my campaign. I do not have tieflings in my campaign as a rule, right?
Neither do I.
My assumption would be that given if they existed at all, they would tend to exist in like somewhere like Ayus or something, and they might not be, how can I put it? They might get trampled in the pecking order, if that makes sense. Someone might see them and want to wipe them out quickly as competition. When in the Good Kingdoms, they would be feared and reviled. Good and neutral, a lot of good neutral territories. What I did with this was, the idea here is that the Tiefling was part of a bloodline that had been managed by members of the Horn Society, and also a renegade offshoot with the cult of Asmodeus. And the idea was that in the event that this was part of a long-term scheme by Asmodeus and the horned ones, in the event that something like the Crook of Rao was ever used, these tieflings' blood could be used in magical rituals as a workaround. Okay. So basically, the children are kept. They're bred. They're encouraged to breed because the cults want that bloodline, right? They want that drop of blood, but for the ritual that they know they can perform in case they're ever cut off. Unfortunately, as the tieflings get older, this player character, her character came upon an older tiefling being vivisected and studied, and it freaked her out, and she ran off. And that led to some other stuff in her backstory. But the point is that she was, to them, nothing more than an instrument. And then when she gets out into the wider world, of course, she's a tiefling and she's reviled. This isn't at all an emo kind of.
Was that an NPC though?
That was actually a PC.
That was actually a PC. Okay.
And I have a tiefling, and I was like, well, how would we fit this in here?
Okay.
And I was like, well, wait, just outside of Spine Castle, you have a keep where there are clearly surviving elements of the Horn Society. And we worked out the backstory, and worked out the fact that one of the other player characters was actually her father.
Love it.
Like, he had been investigating the cult and had relations with her mother. That happens in the real world, man. Go undercover.
I know, just being smart.
So I was like, yeah, I know, and it led to a horrible thing where basically they didn't know until they encountered this horrible undead priest who was posing as a priest of Foltus and was claiming that he was going to show them the light, right? And the light was basically all will be revealed in the light, including the fact that your daughter is here with us. And basically the two player characters were like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Like big stunning drop like there, and that was the cliffhanger for that week, and it developed from there. But my point is that with that, it's a rare thing, right? There were two NPCs there's a merchant from the Monquelad, right, or whatever the Merchants Association is from the Clunish lands,
right?
And he had a fire genasi and a water genasi as henchmen. And it made sense to me because elemental magic, rare. This merchant is extremely wealthy. Of course, he would have either hired or purchased these genasi to be his trained bodyguards, right? The elemental magic connection makes sense, but again, that's also him showing off, right? They're like bling to him. The fact that he has these two bodyguards is his way of showing off to the other merchants and to the masses. So, they're rare. They're not like running around loose everywhere. So
do you have any that are playing right now?
Let's see. I'm trying to think of who my players are. No, everyone right now is either a human or a halfling because they're on an undercover mission back there. The tiefling is on her way to in disguise, mind you.
All right, still part of the
Greyhawk.
campaign.
Yeah, they're retired into story is the light way I think.
Hey, that's still part of the campaign.
Pick up their story later if we choose to.
Yeah. Anna's got Zestra, who I actually have ported into my campaign, and she's an Allo Demon. Right?
You have her as an Allo Demon?
I thought she said she was an Allo Demon. Grazitz is her father.
She's a drow demon Cambion.
Female. She's an Allo Demon.
Yeah, El Clavdra is her mother and Gras is her father, so she's an
Allo Demon.
Cambion.
Okay.
Well, call it Allo Demon if you want to.
Absolutely.
Drow, Drow
yeah,
Cambion.
it's cool.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, oh my God, Patrick! Wow, keep it rolling here. Massive tonight. 75%, John. So, nothing wrong with that. For me, I look, and I'll say I got two different sets of rules, and we're talking about all these different classes and ideas.
Mm-hmm. Oh, races, you mean?
Races. Yeah, I apologize. My guys, when we do new groups of firsts, come to me if they want to do anything out of the ordinary and special. I'm like, okay, and then we'll work it out, right?
Yeah, because you have a cool big table with what races goes with.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But sometimes they'll want to experiment. A lot of the experimentation comes with right now is coming with demi-humans and specialty priests. I get a new one almost every time we do a new group of firsts. I have a specialty priest of Branda Barish recently, specialty priests of Moradins. You know, they just want to try different things. So that's been a spot where the demi-humans have gotten some love lately. But I won't allow my special groups to go beyond. I want them to experience my Greyhawk and our old school Greyhawk. So I'm not having Tabaxi. I'm not having Tieflings. I'm not having Dragonborn. I want them to experience elves, half-elves, dwarves, gnomes, halflings, humans, half-ogres, yes, and half-orcs, yes, but that's it. I want those base 1E classes from the Player's Handbook with a couple of arcana ones and special ones thrown in, but that's where we go. Because I want them to experience the old school style game. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, okay. Yeah. Yep. No Asimars. Asimars for Buck Rogers, prof. I got him. See, I'm zenging him in his own game. So, wow! Thank you all. My gosh, this is crazy. Thank you so very much for everyone for
nice one, Patrick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right. Here. Curtis said he loved this article, so let me just hop here real quick, and we'll spend about 10 seconds on it. Here's the Snow Elves article.
Okay.
Yep. Anyone know David Reimer?
What issue was that?
155.
Okay, thank you.
This is where the Snow Elves come from.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a whole stretch of in those issues, just to throw the issues out there. Around that time, it was a really great time. You had Dragon 131 had the Smurf Nebulin point of view.
Yep.
Dragon 152 had the Duragar, and 155 had the Grugach. And then, of course, you had the Snow Elves introduced. So it was a really great time for those kinds of articles.
It was the second generation beyond Roger Moore's.
Yep.
It was. I still prefer Roger Moore's better because it's more base, and it's okay. It's okay. I mean, this is great. It's great to have this stuff. So I'm going to ask: was there ever? Oh God, no! I got zip it, Jay, zip it. I was just going to ask if there was ever beyond the Dragon Mountain. There's ever a Dragonborn one, or what? I don't think there was. Article like that, and 155 a lot of fairy and elf. Yeah, this is all about elves. This has a lot in the Grugach here.
I love
remember, these are deities from this one dragon. These are 4 elven deities I have in my campaign, and particularly Elf Araththernal, the elven drow hunter god.
Well, yeah, they were integrated in later editions of D&D firmly into like 3rd edition and at the 2nd edition too, and onwards they were firmly established.
Gary, I do 100%. Love them. And remember, I'm coming from frickin' oh my god, there's one deity for every. There's Moradin, there's Corel and Larethian. Oh, there is a tree, though, for Sylvan Elves. Rolfane Ralphil. That's where I come from. There's Garl Glittergold. There's nothing else beyond that. When Roger Moore's articles came out, oh my gosh, it was a breath of fresh air.
And by the way, along those lines, I was just
go for it.
Because this is relevant.
Please.
The complete Book of Elves, which is much reviled, but still has some interesting and
right here.
Is that reviled?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of people really kind of don't like that book. Pardon me. And matter of fact, if you're interested, the guy who wrote it went into video game design, and actually did a video apologizing for it as part of the Kickstarter or something.
It's a little. Well,
it's Elven. I love it. Yeah, I'm not. I might not use all the content, but yeah. At least it's something to.
It's got it doesn't have a Greyhawk feel to it.
Except this will be the interesting thing. You mentioned that, but here's what it says on page, and I think this is where I take my general idea of Greyhawk as a kind of. Well, okay, I'll just go ahead and point it out. On page 26, it mentions they're very much the elves of Oath are very much the stereotypical elf concerned with things most elven. Some contend that Oath is the elven homeland, the place from which all others sprang.
Great question.
Then it goes on to a digression and then mentions, still, the elves of Oath tend to be, quote-unquote, purer in form than the elves of many other worlds. Their ideals and goals are often closer to the AD&D standard than those in other worlds.
Yeah.
In almost every regard, they are the average elf, save for the Grugach and Valley Elves.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the idea, again, that if you have a multiverse, right?
Right.
And you want to play, okay, you want your elves to be something different. You want this, that. Here, my Greyhawk elf, the Greyhawk elf is going to be the baseline elf. This is going to be the elf that you think of when you think pretty traditional elf, right? Or the traditional D&D AD&D elf. And I kind of like that, if that makes sense. It allows, sure, you can have, as I mentioned, you can have. Go into Odd Alley, right, and in Greyhawk City, you can encounter an ogre magi from an unparalleled world who's a good guy, who's actually a nice guy. You can have variation across the multiverse, but as far as a baseline, as far as going back to 1st edition and the box, Basic Expert, and even the box, just the original three-book box set, here is your standard elf. And I kind of like the idea that you can strip everything away and get back to something that basic. I know that some people want that complexity. They want the modern take. But I'm like, here's the thing: is you have multiple worlds that offer the modern take. So there's something to be said for a world that preserves some of that old school flavor, I think. Yeah, that's my take anyway.
Okay.
The Greyhawk in its way is a kind of cool thing. Part of the coolness of Greyhawk is that it can be used as a world in which these old school things are still baseline.
Yeah, and Tui had its issues too. I mean, that's why once again I don't allow kits. If you're going to do something super special, we're going to back convert it to a 1E class. I just don't want to go there, and I know it's a separate discussion. But like when it comes to the race of the characters, it's guys talking about blade singers. There's another thing, So yeah, you got to be really got to be careful with that. So as Greyhawk Dark Elves are the cast out. No, Lomas. I mean, Carlos doesn't allow Greyhawk Dark Elf player characters ever, which is fine. It's just his game, So.
Mikko needs.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, we haven't talked about them. Yeah.
Trying to quit. Mike, can it play PCs?
What about Kenku? What about new versus old school Kenku and the idea of Kenku as a playable? No. Yeah, exactly.
Why don't we just have Veggie Pygmies then?
I love Kenku, by the way, but I like them as
the bunny folks. Yeah.
The old. Yeah. Oh no Herondon or whatever they're called.
No, none of that.
I don't know what they.
Because it's gonna introduce them and then have it go full water down on them.
Since we're getting up to time, let's talk about this. Give me something completely out there that you would, in a special circumstance, allow as a player character.
I would allow the Cambion as a special player character in special circumstance. Orcs, almost any humanoid under special circumstances. Drow under special circumstances too. Yeah, in the right campaign. Grey Elf, another one. I would, and also the deep races like Swerfneblins, and
so basically,
maybe, yeah.
Basically, you like what's in the Arcana.
Well, no, I don't like what's in there, but I like the idea behind them, so to speak. I'm the one that steals ideas and flavor and stuff, and then make my own version of it. But it's very much up to what the stories should play out. Where we are we down in the Underdark, then a lot of things will come, and are we like now in Shieldlands? I'm considering half orcs and other humanoid, half humanoids, even full humanoids might come, because there are some of them that are employed by and loyal to the Shieldlands. So then all of a sudden they become possible, so to speak. It's up to the story and the setting and the place. Mechanics are just there to support the stories and support I don't see Greyhawk as a game system at all. I see it as a place. And then you can use whatever rules in order to tell your stories in that place, so to speak. But that's just my way of interpreting things.
Okay, yeah. That's cool. Les, what are your thoughts? Like, think of something crazy.
Crazy stuff. Well, I've had goblin shaman / warlocks before. I've also had let's see, crazy stuff that I have allowed or will allow. I had someone who had giant ancestry. Now, they weren't a half giant, but they had giant ancestry somewhere back in their bloodline. And, of course, that raises the question of how that would work, to which my thing is, let's be imaginative about how that might work. But the thing is that, like, it basically was, it was, I was looking at, like, Giant Craft. I was looking at that Bastards book that Green Ronin did. And I was thinking, this could work. The player had wanted a really tough pugilist character. I mean, tougher than normal, but not very bright. And I was like, this will be ideal. Not more than a half ogre. This guy could flatten a half ogre, but he's not very bright, except when it comes to fighting. And he suddenly goes into that mode in the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes, where he starts visualizing the boxing match. Mm-hmm. This giant this character of giant descent. That's the part where his brain kicks in and he starts anticipating all the fighting moves. So that's where his intelligence lies, if that makes sense. Other characters who I might allow. That's a good question. I'd probably say it would be a case by case basis.
Yeah.
And a location basis.
Yeah, I agree.
A little bit what players are interested in, and if you can have like a dialogue before the campaign on what they want to do and stuff. Yeah.
So I tried Wingfolk in the past, right? Out of Best of Dragon Volume 3, didn't work. Flying PCs was a bad idea, right? Just is.
Yeah, that's because the flying rules are so.
Yeah, it's too advantageous for a first level character group to have someone who can scout like that. Yeah, it's because
the flying rules are crappy.
Yeah,
and we had a whole gap in where we talked about those, and yeah, so because the flying rules are, in my opinion, crappy.
Here's what I would allow, and that's not happening. So anyone who says, "Oh, I want to do that next time I play,"
yeah.
I have mongrels with a putrid tongue, and right now, the big one is the half halfling, half orc junior. The new junior's running around causing this new group trouble. First adventure, of course. I would allow some bizarre orc mix. So whether it's not orc elf, orc dwarf, maybe orc halfling. I would do something like that if a player character who's, was created there and fled or something. But that's part of giant halfling. That's funny. Well, remember, there's not far from Altamira is a land where halflings and stone giants coexist. It's like 20 miles away. That's it. So Lossels, that's fun. No Lossel PCs. No Lossel PCs. I mean, come on.
This ties into one thing. I think one key ability is that something, in order to be viable as a player character, it needs to be intelligent and wise enough, so to speak. Meaning something that is so too dumb to be viable. Meaning if animal things are ruled out because they don't have the intelligence. They need to be able to reach high enough. So but once that, then that, so there are things, but then you have things that are will be tricky. But for some, and sometimes if you want to be hilarious, you can like take evil things like trolls and whatnot. You have like the reverse dungeon and stuff. So there's certain types of games that can break the norm in a lot of other ways too. So for like a one shot defending the dungeon, whatever. So you can, meaning, I could think about running a one shot where they play whatever, so to speak, and I can have them as playing goblins, a reverse dungeon thing. Meaning Tim's reverse dungeon games are awesome. So I could think about maybe run something like that as an experiment, but not for long-term campaign. Yeah, exactly.
Play test.
Or like a fun side thing or whatever, something. So
actually, there's something else that I wanted to squeeze in there.
Yep.
If I may, before we go, since elves are definitely their own thing, but I wanted to point out right quick about halflings. A couple of points right quick.
Have you missed them? Yep.
And I've said this before, and I stand by this statement. To me, when you think halfling, you're thinking the ultimate bourgeois, right? These are the ultimate little middle class citizens, in many ways.
Yeah.
And of course, you have the tendency then to have them go criminal, right? But here's my thing:
middle class go criminal. You mentioned middle class and then criminal. Yeah.
The reason I mentioned that is I was thinking of that line by Balzac, right, about how all great fortunes have their beginnings in great crimes.
Yeah.
So you have that idea that maybe the halflings acquired their middle class existence through shady means, and certainly even in I was going to mention about the Greyhawk. Halflings. This is from Roger Moore's article on Elmshire, I believe, where he mentions that after all the shenanigans with the Greyhawk Wars, etc., one of the things that happened was the halflings owned a bunch of land just outside of the Cairn Hills, right? And they knew that now that Greyhawk had moved in and was going to protect the halflings, it was inevitable that the big folk would start moving in, right? So what those halflings did was they sold, and the gnomes in the Cairn Hills realized this too. The gnomes went ahead and bought the land from the halflings, so that there would be wee folk, there'd be little folk basically occupying all that territory legally. so that it couldn't be settled by a bunch of tall folk from Greyhawk, which I kind of love, and it's kind of shifty if you think about it. And it also with halflings, I'm kind of reminded of, not to speak out of hat, but I know a gentleman that I used to hang out with was telling me about a certain well-known business and the family that started it, and how back in the days when everything was less well regulated and say digitally archived, etc. So the way that some of these businesses got started is they would take out loans, but the loans would never necessarily be signed for, or they would be signed in such a way that they would be utterly uncollectible. And so you wound up with all this great money being lent and invested in these businesses growing, and then when the people who'd loaned the money, or the banks that had loaned the money, wanted to collect, they couldn't, and whoever had made the loan wound up going off and working for the company, right? So I like to think of little halfling schemes that involve stuff like that, not explicit criminality, if that makes sense, not necessarily robbery, but certainly smuggling and shady land deals and things like that.
Okay. I like it.
That was a new take on halflings. I'm intrigued. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
No, so Alan has a halfling who thinks in Greyhawk City in the foreign quarter. He's part of the adventure group, the Huntsman. He thinks he's Jabba the Hutt of. He's trying to take the foreign quarter over. So he's making all these business deals with as he goes with adventurers, and then if he needs to use a little force here and there, he does. But most of it's underhanded business deals. So it does exist, in my game. He's done a real good job with it. He's a halfling fighter thief. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I just love, like I said, also I love the idea there that, halflings, gnomes, going back to what we've said near the beginning of the program about how some of these races might not entirely trust humans. I like the idea that the halflings are like, oh, great, Greyhawks, militia, and mountaineers, etc., are going to protect us, but we don't want a bunch of, longshanks moving into the area. So, hey, gnomes, here's some territory that we're gonna have to sell sooner or later. We want you to buy it. And the gnomes are like, great, because we don't want them breathing down our necks either. We're purchasing that land from you, and now you've got all these gnomish farmers. I dig that, man, and I bless Roger Moore for that. I think that was I know it was in the Elmshire article. I think that was originally his idea, and that's kind of cool. And Nazrat, yes, I think that we can multi-class it as a fighter real estate broker.
Matching subs, everyone. Boom, 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 boom.
Nice.
All right. I appreciate it during September. Yeah, of course. Which race makes the best bad guy? That's a loaded question. I don't think it has anything to do with race.
No, it depends on what kind of bad guy you want.
Yeah, I think humans actually.
But humans,
humans of the most are high there.
Rari is like one of the worst bad guys there is.
For one main reason is that because they can hide in plain sight.
Yeah.
Well, Also, I was going to say that something that I did recently in the campaign was there were some goblins who had ambushed my players, and my players were rescued by. It was a really brutal ambush, but my players were sort of rescued by some mercenaries who came up and helped finish off and chase off them, right? But it turns out the mercenaries are, among other things, slavers. The players managed to represent themselves as having a position of authority, so they were okay, right? But then they got to watch as these mercenaries, for sport, hunted down some of the goblins who were nearby who had ambushed the players, brought them back, and basically brought them into a nearby cave where there were screams coming out. And my players were like, Les, you're an absolute bastard. These guys ambushed us. They killed some of our hirelings. They severely injured some of us, and we're feeling sorry for them because of what the humans are doing. And I'm like, yeah, well, that's because these guys are in some ways, much more dangerous because they're doing it for sport, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, humans can be really, really, really bad. And I would, and by the way, Lomas, I would agree. The Starlit Brotherhood is a good example of bad guys who are human. Very.
Yeah, I mean, but yeah. That's another. We could definitely go on that topic for another day. I think we also should go back to elves too.
Yeah, and elves. I love elves. dearly. I think that's come up a few times in our discussions.
David Keith, what's up?
I love the idea of, and this goes back to, Jay, and God bless it, it came up on the YouTube channel where I think it was and Andrew Peters mentioned in the comments there, of course, that the Grey Elves were referred to as fairies in the 77 Monster Manual. That idea of this race that is Fae but still tied to this world. Again, that kind of goes back to what I was saying about the gnomes too, where the gnomes see the elves as, how can I put this? Easily distracted, shallow, because the elves are very much of this, fascinating, nature, the world, etc. But that's a changeable thing,
right?
And again, the idea that I've mentioned before, I think when we were discussing the Feywild, that you can have the elven court, and it's like the court at Selene, and its mood be dominated by the change of seasons. Except the seasons that are being reflected there, the mood of the court, if you will. A season can be thousands of years, right, or hundreds of years, as the cycle changes. So you have wheels within wheels. You have seasons within seasons. You have cosmic seasons. You have change of the shifting calendar of the court itself. Then you've got the seasons of nature. I kind of like those kinds of ideas, if that makes sense. And I like the idea also of the elves as somewhat haughty. I've always
yeah. I mean, the Grey Elves in mine being the noble. I tried to push that in the 24-hour stream too. Yeah, they were awfully arrogant. Oh yeah, there's no problem. There's 100 dwarves and elite troops, no problem. Yeah, oh yeah, I agree with you there. So that's another thing differences between types of elves, and we can definitely push that in a future discussion. I think we should. So look at that, it's still going. I'm matching. Like I said, it's September. I really appreciate all the support. This has been great, and I know the 2 hours fly by when we have these discussions. So, what do you want to say in closing, Anna, and then Les, and then we'll go some shout outs.
I think this is a very important bit because it ties into the campaign as a whole and player characters, so it's a vital part of the game. And it's also something that has been, I would say, treated badly mechanically over the years, and there's still things to be. Newer game system tends to do this better than old ones, but there's still pitfalls and stuff I think that to do. And what I'm trying to emphasize here is that you can try to keep the old feel of and the content of Greyhawk and the place how it used to be, but mechanically advance it into newer editions and to get more interesting rules with cooler options. And to do that is depending on what style of game. If you want to run an old school game the way it was supposed to be run back in the day, that's awesome. But this is a place where you can do a lot of development, I think, and get cool, interesting. Because the key, I think, is to have a rule system that creates these kind of builds the basis for telling these stories, and let the players have interesting options that doesn't ruin the game mechanically or unbalance it more than intended and stuff like that. Which is the really tricky bit here, is not having overpowered, because that's boring too, and stuff. So this ties into both mechanics, story, setting, and play style, which means that it's one of these things that are, it's very, very important and often overdone or mechanically just treated. It's been a firm mechanic issue, and that loses the kind of the broader aspects of race, or what the players can play, so to speak, the type of characters they can play.
Les?
I agree and disagree simultaneously, which should surprise no one. It's basically that, to me, I agree that the rules have changed, and one has the option of playing later editions in Greyhawk. The thing is that because the rules were so intrinsically linked to Greyhawk, with first edition and by implication, I think earlier edition. You run the risk sometimes if you embrace modern rules and options across the board and without heavily considering how it impacts the world of changing something about the world. I mean, there's a lot of great material that was done for third edition and 3.5 that I like the lore, on a lore angle. I like it. Mechanically, it changes stuff about, like, for example, that idea that characters, if you had a 5th level or 7th level character in earlier editions, that's pretty badass. Still, but then you get into a 7th level this and a 12th level that multi-class who also picked up these feats, and it starts unbalancing the game. Not even unbalancing the game world. It unmoors the game world, if that makes sense. So I see it as a kind of balancing act when you're using later games or later editions. How do you incorporate some of these options and rules? For example, I think that the idea of species and background is a cool thing. That being said, how can you approach something like that without completely unbalancing the way that the setting feels and that old school vibe? Do you even want to do that? Maybe you prefer using a different setting or homebrewing your own. You can certainly do it, but there's a question of the exchange that's made, like what's gained and what's lost, and what you want. It ultimately boils down to what the DM and the players want out of the setting, and the direction they want to take the setting.
Yeah.
And the feel of the set that they're going for. So that would be my.
That's great. Both of you, that was great. For me, I'm going to be true to what I've done for 44 years, but I'm going to have a little hair more flexibility than I've had in the past.
Yeah.
Just the way things evolve. So that doesn't mean you won't see, if you try, everyone out there, this emote ever again, because you will see the no just no. But that doesn't mean that, I'm going to throw that out on you all the time. But I will more than often. All right. Great discussion. Les, what's going on? What you got going on?
Man. Well, obviously I have my games coming up for Virtual Greyhawk Con.
Yep.
Which I'm going to mention to everyone. The tables are currently full, but please, if you're interested, join the wait list. You never know, someone might drop off, and I'm always glad to, always glad when people express an interest, and I'd be glad to have you at the table. I'm glad to have the people at the table that I'm having at the table, and I'm glad that I'll have, if someone doesn't work out, I'd be glad to have you at the table. So go ahead and put yourself on the wait list if you like, and if not, check out everybody else because there are some great games and some great DMs.
Return to the Strange Stone Dwelling is one. No one is on. Look at this: Gary Julian, Dylan Morris, Jonathan Dawes, Ewan Cummings, Norker, and Patrick got into that one, but there's no one on the wait list.
And that one is first edition / Osric.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and I'll say that it's a very, very trippy. How can I put this? It's my homage to some of the weirder elements in Appendix N and the related literature, including some Clifford Simac. So definitely, if you get it, or check that out. And then, of course, the other one is The Fist of the Usurper, which is a Spine Castle adventure, which is that one's the Spine Castle adventure is filled and has someone on. I think it already has someone on the waiting list.
Yeah, you can't see the waitlist people here. You can't, but yeah. So
but definitely,
awesome.
Check it out. And then I've got some top secret projects I'm working on, and I've got some articles for the various zines that I'm working on. And let's see what else. I've also been engaged in a, since this came up, I've been engaged in a fairly massive rereading project, mining information from that middle period, that forgotten period of Dragon Magazine that we were just discussing. Like,
right.
Because there's so much great material there, including Greyhawk material.
Oh my God, yeah.
Explicitly, that was just has been overlooked. and a lot of it's just so flavorful. But
Yep.
yeah, so there's that, and other than that, man, just rocking, rolling, and breathing.
Appreciate you coming on. What a great discussion. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for having me. It was a
Yep.
great time.
What's going on, Anna?
Okay, yes, there's tons of stuff going on. I'm back to Greyhawk again after what is it, like 9 weeks in
Wow.
commission land. Yeah, there might be a couple of small adjustments to do, but those are done in a few hours, nothing more than that than the stuff. So now it's gearing up for virtual Greyhawk Con and Game Hall Con. That's one big thing. I'm also starting to now they're starting to post things again, thankfully. So now there are things been up. The first one out was the Plaran Keeps. It was a kind of a concept article blog post that I'm figuring out how the best way to present a local area, like buildings, settlements, and stuff like that. What type of maps, how to package them, and how to send them out. And from the reception I got, was a lot of people liked it. So I think it was a good way of doing it. It's like taking an area in Greyhawk, present the area, have a history, the buildings, and so on, and an area map and some 3D views, so you can kind of get both a visual look and the stories behind them, and then the buildings and stuff. So I have a whole range of places that are going to get that treatment that I've already done a lot of the location maps and stuff for. So it's more like making the area views and writing the background text and stuff. So I hope that I can have a couple of those out per week coming out in the so on. And then also on Sunday will be the first play test with players on Hawktail rules. Reaching out for it. I wrote the dying rules for today, and I can tell a little bit. Player agency is one of my goals, or one of my kind of guiding principles in trying to put together the Hawktail. So you have to decide when you want to do a death save or not. If you want to, when you reach 0 hit points, if you just want to brave it and say, damn, I want to stay in this fight to the bitter end, you can do so. It becomes risky at the end, but you can stay in the fight longer, so to speak. Or you can decide to, I'm just going to give up and just lay down here and try to survive. So you have, even after when you're dying, there are decisions to be made, and you have to kind of, should I do it this way or should I do it that way? That's part of the design. I didn't want anything to just happen to you and then there's nothing to do about it. I want to avoid those situations as much as possible. So as a player, you have to decide how hard to push it, so to speak. And there are some risks, but more, so you can kind of escalate the risk, so to speak. But it's also, I want a very gritty game, but not necessarily deadlier. That's one of the stuff. So I think those can be, I try to make them less complicated at the same time. It's really hard, and I definitely haven't the final version, but there will be an alpha version. So that will be more blog posts about that too, both the overall principles and my guiding principles. So you guys can tell me afterwards how well I actually follow these, so to speak. And so that is those are the mind and then the overview of the shield lands mapping stuff. And yeah, those are the things that are in the immediate pipeline, so to speak. Yeah.
Are you on Friday?
Yep, I'm on Friday. Yep.
Right,
and
cool.
Then it will be I'm not sure what it will be on Friday. I haven't decided yet. It's 2 days. So we'll see what I have. Depends. Sometimes it depends what I've been working too much on. So I'm tired. So I do something else on Friday, or I'm very into something. So then I will keep doing it. So yep. So that is coming Friday. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's good to have a friend at the post office, because one of my players works there, and when I stopped in to drop off of my stuff, that person said, "Well, I only got 2, and that's all I think we're going to get. So you all get nothing and like it, but I got 2 sets of the Dungeons and Dragons stamps. It's limited edition sets, so there you go, 2 sets. I'm not, I'm going to hold on to them. Who knows? All right, so got that.
Cool.
Got some quickie announcements. Back to Virtual GrowCon. It appears that Ed Greenwood is confirmed for my game, playing on my game. They're D&D stamps. at the post office.
Yeah.
Yep. Tough to get a hold of, from what I've told. So Lost City of the Soul, Ed Greenwood should be playing in that. He may show up a little late, but he will probably be playing in that. And I just got confirmation today. Returning to the Grand Joust Saturday night. The son of Smelf Eliador, Luke Gygax will be participating this year again in the Joust. Okay, so there you go. So we have that confirmed, and wow, it's getting filled up quick, but there's plenty of room for plenty of great games. Look at all the ones that still say "get" on them. So please sign up if you haven't already. It's only $6.30, counting like the.
Thank you everyone who signed up for my game for interested in playing with me. That's awesome.
Yep. So there you go. That's Virtual Crowd Con. Now tomorrow we're back and we're in A2. And I got it set up. It wraps around. Yes. So the map for the it's not anywhere near exact to what that mess is on the page. I can't do it, but I got this set. I wonder whose laboratory area that is. So yeah, that is. Third sitting of A2 Secret of the Slaver Starcade with Curtis joining us as playing Fritz Winchester again. So that'll be tomorrow night. Yeah, you like that? I love my minis. So that is tomorrow, and then Saturday at 1. I have a great group. So the new group, still without a name because the name that they gave me is terrible. It's worse than the nuclear meat, and I'm like, God, that's awful. You gotta think of something better.
What was it?
It's named after a freaking undead horse that they had animated in the first one. I'm like, that's dumb. You're not gonna even remember it. I don't even remember the name of it. It's in here somewhere.
So you can always force them to call themselves the horse with no name.
Yeah, that's better. That's better. So, Cord can't play. So Heather Hex named. I know she changed her name to Violence on Twitch. Okay, whatever. She's playing Cobra. So if you recall, at the end 2 weeks ago, they got their bounty. The dwarf, the head of the dwarf Princess Highwayman, bandit, and then on the way back, he was dead in the middle of the night. Someone killed him, and they don't know who. Well, maybe we'll find out a little bit more about that on Saturday. So there you go, and that's what's going on with me. And then Sunday night will be a gab, and we haven't even gotten that place. But the name of the title is Collaboration for the game on Saturday, 1 to 5, with what a great cast and a lot of brand new players to D&D. So it's pretty neat. All right, let's do the giveaway here. Giveaway gets a double shot here from the super level hype train that we had. So I'm going to close this out. Let's see who wins. And the winner is the Naz. Well, Naz.
Congratulations.
I ain't shipping to the UK, so you're going to get a couple. You're actually going to get 2 gift certificates to Troll Lord Games. All right? That's what I'm going to do for you, Naz. So, yep. I was just talking to him on at the Naz. Yep. I was just talking to him on Discord. So he may have stepped away. Remember, it's 5-hour difference there, 6. So he's still up. So, yep. UK guy. So I got it covered. All right. We're going to raid into Tim, who plays Tim DeTruly on this group Saturday. Stronghold D&D's on now, so we're going to raid into them. Thank you all. Anna, thank you. Les, thank you. I got to get off. My son needs to go to sleep because he starts high school tomorrow. So,
woohoo!
Yeah, isn't that great? I want to chat him up there and get him put to sleep rather quickly here. But thank you. See you all tomorrow night, 7:30.
Yeah.
Going to be doing a couple giveaways, multiple sponsored giveaways tomorrow. So hopefully I don't hit the wrong button here.
Thanks for watching, guys.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Setting the raid up here. No. Boom. Thanks for the raid from Encounter Online. Appreciate it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. See you tomorrow night. Thanks.
Later.
Just make sure this went. Yep.